Alana turned off the bedroom light. Time to go to bed, she thought. Tomorrow would be a day off, so she could stay in bed longer. But it was almost 1 o'clock in the morning and her eyes were getting sleepy. I can't wait to get under the covers. In her head flashed only one thought. The woman watched her favorite TV series, and here she could not tear herself away. There was everything: love, betrayal, and a difficult period in the main character. All this was so reminiscent of the fate of Alana. The series, as it should, ended with a happy ending. It was clear from the very beginning. In such movies, it could not be otherwise. And in Alana's life, anything could happen. However, the circumstances were such that now she is doing well. I can't believe it sometimes. How great it all turned out in the end. She smiled at the thought that Alana's life was as if it had been scripted by the director of all those TV shows. It all started many years ago, and at the start of her life, young Alana was faced with a lot of adversity and loss. Her childhood came in memories only vaguely. Only sensations and images remained in her memory. Her father, strong and reliable, often carried her daughter on his strong shoulders. The girl adored these moments. And fun, and a little scary to look at the world from such a height, thought Alana, feeling the support of her father's hands. Her mom was like a warm hug, kisses, with a gentle voice, her face so high it was lost in a haze. Alana couldn't remember mom's features. They were blurring and slipping away. But amazingly, for some reason, Alana could still clearly see her mother's dress in front of her, turquoise with small black polka dots. And then her parents were gone. Everything happened suddenly. A fire in the dormitory, caused by a cigarette butt left on the sofa, took the lives of young students. Luckily, Alana stayed at a 24-hour daycare center that night. She remembered longing for her family. First she cried, then she was angry at her mom and dad. Why don't they come? Why don't they pick me up like they used to? The nanny, as best she could, tried to explain to the 3-year-old girl what had happened. What had happened? Alana was very small then, but she still remembered her feelings: fear, despair, and for some reason rage. The girl was about to be sent to an orphanage, and the paperwork was already being processed when her Aunt Alex, her father's sister, suddenly showed up. Alex lived in the village, single-handedly raising 2 daughters, and she didn't really need Alana. Brother and sister did not communicate much, but relatives of Alan's father persuaded Alex, saying that it would be wrong if the girl would grow up in an orphanage when her aunt was alive. As a result, Alex's aunt, for whom the opinion of people was very important, sheltered her niece. Alanino's childhood was not a happy one. Aunt Alex was not happy about the extra mouth, but she fulfilled her duties, dressed, fed, and brought up Alana. She sent her niece to school on time, kept her busy, and taught her household skills. But the aunt's attitude toward her own daughters was different. She looked at them with love and tenderness, bought sweets for them with her last money, and dressed them up in clean dresses. Alanina's wishes were not taken into account. She received old clothes, after her cousins. When they fidgeted in front of the mirror, her aunt smiled, calling them beauties and photo models. Alana, trying to get approval, did the same, but heard in her address a completely different assessment. That's the same monkey screams. All in the mother went, would not have been a case to do. So trying to be inconspicuous and not to attract attention to herself, Alana became more and more withdrawn. To prove to Alex that she had not taken her niece in vain, and that she could be of use to her, became an urgent task for Alana. From an early age, she realized that no one would love her just for her pretty eyes. Recognition and respect had to be earned. Dreaming of independence, after finishing 9 grades of village school, Alana decided that it was time to act. She applied to the college, as continuing her school education and entering a university seemed something impossible. You need to get a profession as soon as possible and become independent, Aunt Alex reasoned, frankly expressing the idea that university was not an option for Alana. Once you get a specialty, you'll start earning your own money, Auntie persuaded, not hiding her thoughts that it was time for Alana to think about a future outside the village. The phrase "you're a hula face" had been said to her, but despite that, Alana felt she had grown up to be a pretty girl. She saw her reflection and noticed traits in herself that set her apart from her cousins. Alana realized more and more how much she resembled her mother, who had also grown up in an orphanage. Alana knew little about her maternal relatives, but she thought that perhaps they would have accepted her differently, better than Aunt Alex. Modest and quiet, Alana did not spend her evenings with boys or go dancing, but she still found admirers in the village. By the age of 16, she was being courted by local boys, which was a surprise to the girl and perhaps proof that she had something special that attracted attention to her. Alana decided that before building a personal life, she wanted to achieve professional independence and feel more confident in her own abilities. She did not seek an early marriage, for she had dreams of a strong family and a loving husband, and she realized that to realize these dreams, she had to become independent first. After high school, Alana went to the city and soon began to live an independent life. She was full of ambition and desire to achieve independence. City life seemed confusing to her at first, but over time Alana adapted to it, rejoicing in her relative independence from her aunt. At the age of 20, Alana proudly received a degree in food technologist, but soon faced the realities of adult life when she realized that without work experience it would be difficult to find a job in her specialty. After graduation, the state support stopped, and the girl had to look for any job to support herself. Alana started looking for work actively, not neglecting even low-skilled jobs, such as a cleaner in the Housing and Utilities Department, because she had to survive somehow. The job was hard and poorly paid, but the offer of a room under the stairs was a lifeline, even though it only provided her with shelter and a minimal means of subsistence. Nevertheless, Alana didn't give up, continuing to look for a better job where she could use her knowledge and get paid accordingly. She went to many interviews, carefully presenting her red diploma to potential employers, but to no avail until one day she was lucky. Alana came to one interview at a beverage company with the hope that she would finally be able to start a career in her profession and prove to herself and everyone around her that she could break the stereotype of a young professional with no experience and succeed. She saw a vacancy in the newspaper and decided to try her luck. Already in the first minutes of the interview, the girl realized that she would not be taken. The employee of the personnel department, it seemed, communicated with Alana for a tick. Maybe she was fulfilling some recruitment plan or creating the appearance of work. I immediately guessed that she wouldn't be hired here as a technologist. And then he entered the office, Kevin, a tall man in jeans and a plain black t-shirt under which I could see strong muscles. You could tell he played some kind of sport or went to a gym. He had a sense of strength and self-confidence. He looked like a Hollywood actor, slightly mocking eyes, white teeth, a smile, charming dimples on his cheeks. The man was about 15 years older than Yana. The girl, without wanting to, looked at him. Then she realized and looked away. It was not enough that he noticed her involuntary admiration. He'd think she was a fool. But Kevin noticed. He winked cheerfully at Alana and turned to the human resources lady. "Who's this young, lovely creature who's applying for the technologist position? But she's not a good fit. She has no experience at all, and her specialty is not the same. It's hard to find a job for young people without experience." The man shook his head, looking at Alana with interest. "It's hard for them. What about the secretary position? I need a new assistant right now. She's young, quick, energetic, and she's got the right looks, which is important for our image. We wanted to transfer a technician to this place from the energy department," reminded the personnel officer. "Let's put the girl on probation." "Something tells me she can handle it," Kevin said, winking at Alana. He grabbed a file from his desk and left the office. Without expecting it, Alana had become a secretary. The job was not difficult, and the girl was quickly brought up to speed. She was required to answer the phone and record messages for the boss when he was absent from work. Also, Alana had to prepare coffee for Kevin's visitors and treat them while they were waiting for their turn in the reception area. The salary offered to the girl was such that she couldn't even believe her luck. With this money, she could rent a nice apartment, eat well, and buy herself nice outfits. She could even save a little every month. But all of this kept Alana's mind at ease. Her new responsibilities, her co-workers, and the chic surroundings of the reception area where she worked now were very different from the dirty driveway cleaning she'd been doing recently. But Alana enjoyed her interactions with Kevin. He turned out to be very kind, understanding, and fun. Her boss treated her well, praised her performance, complimented her, and discussed work issues. Alana didn't notice how she fell in love. It was probably her first and immediately strong love. She couldn't imagine life without this man. The object of her secret love was Kevin, of course. But Alana knew he was married to the beautiful and intelligent Cynthia and had 3 wonderful sons. Trying to condemn herself for these feelings, she couldn't escape her sincere emotions. But she realized that this situation had no future. She shouldn't be a nuisance in someone else's family. After convincing herself over the weekend, Alana decided to end her reverie. Over the weekend, Alana got used to the idea that there was nothing she and the chief could have in common. But on Monday, once again seeing his smile and eyes with a sly squint, the girl again ceased to control herself. She was dreaming, daydreaming for real. She wanted Kevin to hug her, to kiss her, to hold her close. Alana would be the happiest person in the world. One evening, Kevin invited Alana into his office. It was late. The co-workers had dispersed. The boss was preparing for an upcoming audit and stayed late to look over the reports. Alana was required by regulation to stay in her office as long as the boss was at work. Kevin rarely stayed late, once every couple or 3 months at most. That's when he did too. "Alana, I need to talk to you straight," the man began as Alana sat down in the visitor's chair. The girl tensed up. Maybe the chief had some complaints about her work. Suddenly he would offer her to write a letter of resignation. Where else would she find such a job? "We've had you for 6 months. You're a good girl, you're a good worker. But I realized not too long ago that it's not just those qualities that attract me to you," Kevin continued, looking Alana straight in the eye and speaking in a quiet, calm voice. Thinking about what had happened, Alana was already feeling a little dizzy. Her heart was pounding frantically in her chest and a chill appeared in her stomach, just like before exams. "I think you have some feelings for me too." "I'm right," Kevin said, looking at Alana point blank and waiting for an answer. How could the girl deny the obvious? Yes, of course she did. She'd been in love with the chief for a long time, tried not to show her feelings, thought she was succeeding well. But no, Kevin, it turns out, understood everything. Later, many years later, Alana looked at the situation with different eyes. Kevin had pressured her, creating the illusion of a choice, even though the decision had been determined in advance. Kevin is a rich, powerful man, handsome, mature, successful. She is a young girl, completely dependent on him. Kevin clearly understood how important the job and the paycheck were to Alana. He skillfully manipulated young girls, making them lose their heads to him. However, the realization of all this came much later. In those days, it seemed that fate generously rewarded her. The girl couldn't even believe her luck. Kevin paying attention to her was unbelievable. She loved him and was willing to do anything for him. "Yes, you're right. I have feelings for you too," Alana admitted, blushing. She herself didn't understand why she suddenly felt so vulnerable. "Then I'm not wrong," the man smiled. "Let's make a deal first. Let's stop replacing each other. Second, I really want to spend more time with you. So I suggest right now we have dinner at a restaurant somewhere. How about it?" Alana shrugged. She wasn't yet used to the idea of Kevin himself proposing a relationship to her. It seemed unbelievable. At that moment, the girl had completely forgotten about her boss's wife and his 3 sons. It all seemed unimportant. The main thing was Kevin, who looked at her with tenderness and admiration, smiled and invited her to dinner. "I'm probably not dressed for a restaurant," Alana finally said. There was no dress code in the company. Everyone wore what they wanted to wear. On this day, Alana came to work in jeans and a t-shirt. If she had known in advance, she would have worn one of her favorite dresses, which she now had plenty of thanks to her good salary. Alana, Victor smiled. "You don't understand anything, and you don't even realize how gorgeous you look in those jeans of yours." "It's just adorable," Kevin said with a smile. They did go to a restaurant that evening. It was the first time Alana had been in the cabin of the chief's expensive foreign car, and it was the first time she had been to a restaurant too. The girl felt a little confused at first. She didn't know how to behave and what to say. She was afraid of looking rude and ignorant in front of Victor. But gradually the man did the seemingly impossible with his jokes and compliments. He dispelled her stiffness. She did not notice how she began to communicate with him simply and sincerely. Kevin wanted to know everything about her, and she told him everything about her cold childhood, about her difficult years of study and her work as a janitor. Kevin looked at her seriously and silently, without interrupting, catching every word she said. "Yeah, you've had a hard life," he said when Alana was done. "Life hasn't spoiled you, but you're with me now, and things will be different." Alana smiled. She believed this strong, powerful man unconditionally. Finally, she felt secure, an unfamiliar but so pleasant feeling. Later, they kissed for a long time in Kevin's car. Alana was dizzy from his embrace and kisses, loving his warmth and touch and responding eagerly. But suddenly, Kevin said it was time to leave. He drove her home and kissed her gently on the cheek goodbye. "You don't look good here," he looked around, surveying his surroundings. "We'll figure something out." From then on, their story began. At work, they didn't advertise their relationship, although Kevin could occasionally smile, especially at Alana in front of all the co-workers, and even compliment her. Soon it was known to everyone. It was making Alana a little tense, but no one said anything to her face. People valued their places and held on to them. Probably that's why no one wanted to ruin the relationship with the chief. Before Alana knew it, Kevin had become everything to her. She didn't need anyone else, just to be near him. To hear his voice, to inhale the scent of her favorite person, to feel the beating of his heart. Alana was ready to dissolve in him, to do for him everything he wanted. When they didn't see each other for a long time, it happened occasionally. Kevin would go on a long business trip or go on vacation with his family. Alana couldn't eat anything. She melted before her eyes and stopped caring about anything. Books were not read, TV series were not watched. The girl counted the days and even hours until she met her beloved. It was like an addiction. Kevin patronized Alana. He liked to surprise and please her. The man was not stingy with gifts, expensive jewelry, brand-name clothes, shoes, certificates to spas. Every time he came up with something new. Kevin rented a luxurious apartment for Alana in the city center, spacious, bright, stylishly furnished. Sometimes he stayed overnight, and in those moments Alana felt especially happy. She imagined they were husband and wife. She didn't have to share him with anyone. And she didn't have to hide either. One thing marred the happiness: Kevin had a family, and that fact was impossible to ignore. The man, without noticing it himself, often told Alana something about his children or his spouse. They were mostly funny and sweet stories. The man loved his boys and had great respect for his wife. Did he love her? Alana couldn't answer that question for herself, and Kevin didn't dare ask. No, they often talked about frank topics, but here Alana was afraid to hear a positive answer. What if Kevin really loved his wife? And she, Alana? Just a passing fancy. And yet Alana felt that Kevin took her very seriously. He may have planned a brief affair with the young secretary at the beginning of the relationship, but then it turned out that they were very good together. Despite the difference in age and social status, "You understand me like no one else," Kevin confessed more than once, looking at Alana. "I feel so good with you, and so relaxed, my soul rests." It's such an amazing feeling to realize that there's someone who accepts you with all your strengths and weaknesses. Kevin was right. Alana did love him with some kind of unconditional love. Even if Kevin had committed some horrible act or crime, it wouldn't have changed Alana's attitude towards him. 10 years flew by unnoticed. Alana and Kevin grew closer during that time. They occasionally flew together on vacations. Kevin would make out a business trip at work and take Alana with him. Those were wonderful days: the sea, the beaches, the incredible beauty of nature. And it was just the two of them, with no other eyes and ears. Alana wondered more than once if Kevin knew that her husband had a mistress for a long time. It was unlikely that she was still in the dark. The woman didn't seem naive or stupid. One day, Alana dared to ask Kevin about it. "Don't worry," he smiled, stroking Alana's hair. "She and I have a loose relationship. We don't stress each other with jealousy and control. Cynthia, just like me, is free to do whatever she wants." Alana couldn't understand it. She explained to herself that this relationship between the couple was not a marriage of love, but of convenience. Kevin and Cynthia's parents were big businessmen who had decided to pool their capital and invest it in their children. There wasn't much love between the couple. Alana liked to think so. It was somehow comforting and gave her hope that when Kevin's children grew up and became independent, he could finally divorce his wife to make her, Alana, his lawfully wedded wife. Alana was no longer the young, inexperienced 20-year-old secretary who had agreed to have an affair with her boss. She was well into her 30s, but she was still naive, perhaps even worldly stupid. It seemed to her, though, that sooner or later Kevin would marry her. 2 more years passed, and then one morning Alana realized she couldn't get out of bed. She felt sick, nausea rising to her throat at the slightest movement. At that moment, the woman guessed that a miracle had happened. It looked like she was expecting a baby. Despite the fact that she and Kevin were very careful, no method of contraception gives 100% results. And here's the result. Despite not feeling well, Alana suddenly felt happy. Her soul felt warm and clear. She still got out of bed and got to the pharmacy where she bought the test. Alana was afraid that she was wrong, but the test did not disappoint. 2 bright stripes showed that she had a baby under her heart. Before talking to Kevin, Alana was hardly worried at all. Yes, he'd said more than once that he didn't want any more children, but she didn't think Kevin wouldn't be happy when he found out about the baby. He loved her so much, cared for her so tenderly, showered her with compliments and gifts. Wouldn't he be happy to hear that they were going to have a baby soon? Alana has been dreaming of a baby for so long, envying moms with strollers. And now she's going to have a baby too. Finally, a son or a daughter, whatever. Kevin, however, frowned when he heard the news. "Alana, we had a deal." There was an accusing tone in his voice. "I don't know how it happened," Alana said, surprised at herself. She had already realized that Kevin was not happy about the baby, but she was still hoping to change his mind. She wanted him to share her joy and excitement, to tell her that everything would be all right. But it wasn't. Kevin stood his ground. He didn't want a child, and the only way out was to terminate the pregnancy. Children out of wedlock were out of the question. Alana cried, begged Kevin to come to his senses, and for the first time in their 12-year relationship, she was angry with him. How dare he suggest she get rid of her long-awaited, wanted child? "I love you, I love what we have. But the baby doesn't. I have a right to decide that too." "No, you don't." Alana slammed the door and stormed out of the apartment Kevin had rented for her. She ran out into the night, wherever she could see. The woman wasn't afraid to stay on the street. She had a cell phone and had accumulated a small fortune over the years. She and her child would have enough for the first time, and then Alana would find a job and things would get better. "I won't betray you, my little one," Alana said to her daughter. Yes, to her daughter. Alana realized what was waiting for the girl the moment she ran away from home. Alana quit her job at Kevin's company and rented a small apartment on the outskirts of town where rent was cheaper. Kevin called often, but every time she answered, she thought he'd come to his senses. But no, he was still insistent he wanted Alana back, but he was urging her to get rid of the baby. Alana was nervous, under tremendous stress every day. She dreaded the future. She couldn't find a job and now had no one to lean on. Alana had grown accustomed to Kevin, to his sensitivity, attention, tenderness, support. He playfully solved all the problems that arose and with a few words lifted Alana's mood. And now Kevin had become alien and inaccessible. Alana felt their connection breaking, and it was almost physically painful. Sometimes she even thought about doing what Kevin wanted her to do, get rid of the baby and go back to her old life. But those thoughts quickly faded. No, Alana would have this baby, give birth to it, and raise it. She could handle it. She had wanted to be a mother for so long. However, despite Alana's best efforts, she was unable to keep the pregnancy going. Worries, constant stress, and nerves, all this together led to a tragic result. Alana curled up right on the street. The pain was such that her eyes went black. She thought she was going to faint. Someone called an ambulance. Alana was taken away from the store, on whose porch she was curled up in pain. The woman was ready to endure any agony as long as her baby was saved. But something told her that nothing would work. There was still hope, but it was very weak and ghostly. In the hospital, on a cold couch, indifferent eyes of doctors, and a voice that said terrible words for Alana clean. There's nothing left to save. Then Alana lay in a room surrounded by other women who were still pregnant. The doctors had saved their babies, and being among themselves, the expectant mothers discussed their babies. Each of them was sure that all threats were over and their babies would be born. Alana, on the other hand, was no longer hopeful. At the first round, the doctor shocked Alana with the news. He told her that she would probably never become a mother again. "Your case is complicated. This was about saving your life. You should know that it is unlikely you will be able to have a natural birth." But the doctors added that there are options, as medicine does not stand still. Alana didn't listen. Further, she fell into the abyss of despair and fear. Was her biggest dream not going to come true? Would no one ever call her mom? What was there to live for? Kevin met Alana at the hospital. How did he know what had happened? Alana was surprised, but not really surprised. She didn't feel much at all at that moment. She was going to go to the apartment she'd rented, but Kevin had taken her home, to the place where she'd lived for years, and was happy. "Stop fooling around," Kevin said. "Get back here. We'd already made a mess of things." Alana didn't care. It took her a long time to come back to life. At first she even ate, but only because Kevin forced her to. She wanted nothing more than a couch and a pillow. Alana blamed herself for not keeping the baby safe. Kevin carried some of the blame too. At first she thought it was his fault. But he had tried so hard. Kevin had turned into a sensitive and considerate man again. He cooked her favorite meals for Alana, watched TV shows with her, cared as much as he could. It was very touching. Kevin seemed genuinely sorry for what had happened. I reevaluated the situation and realized that I was being selfish. "I'm sorry, let's start over. This time I'll be more attentive to your wants and needs. The doctors said you were between life and death. It's scary to think that I might have lost you." Gradually, Alana melted away. She accepted the current state of affairs. After all, the world wasn't about children. Many people nowadays consciously choose childlessness. Besides, she had a loving and sensitive man by her side. And Alana decided to stay happy, no matter what. And it worked. Kevin and Alana began to travel more. For the next 2 years, they traveled almost all over the world. They climbed mountains, bobbed on ocean waves, crossed the desert in jeeps. It was thrilling, exciting, and wonderful. The main thing is that Kevin was always there for us, protecting us, supporting us. His children were grown. They didn't need their father, and Cynthia hardly required his presence. Kevin spent more time with Alana, and she was delighted. But as time went on, things began to change. At first it was subtle, but then it became more and more noticeable. Kevin was suddenly incredibly busy, always working late, traveling for business, and when he was with Alana, he was in his own thoughts. He didn't compliment her anymore. He didn't ask her about the past day or share the events of his life. Alana panicked. She was used to having Kevin around, and it seemed to her that it would always be that way. They had been through so much together, but now something strange and frightening was happening. Kevin was clearly drifting away, and the process was gaining momentum. Alana hesitated to talk about it. She was no longer a naive girl, but her insecurities remained. Outwardly, Alana looked like a successful and contented woman, but it was only an appearance. She was afraid to hear honest answers to her questions, which could redefine her life. That's why she kept quiet. Kevin himself had once dared to have a serious conversation. That evening was forever etched in Alana's memory. Kevin arrived late when she was about to go to bed. Alana was glad because she missed him very much. She missed the companionship, the jokes, and even the funny jabs. Maybe it wasn't all that bad if Kevin was here. Maybe Alana was just getting herself worked up. "Alana, this may be hard to accept right off the bat, but we need to break up." Alana felt like she'd been hit over the head. She fluttered her eyelashes and turned pale, and Kevin hastily pulled up a chair for her, afraid she would faint. Then the man talked at length about how happy he'd been with Alana for nearly a decade and a half, describing her virtues and assuring her that she had more to come. He explained that the relationship had simply exhausted itself. There was no longer that spark, passion, emotion. "The same thing is happening to you." "I can see it," Kevin said, but Alana thought he was wrong. It was incomprehensible to her. Kevin probably thought it was easier to believe that Alana's feelings had cooled too. Kevin talked a lot and persuasively, as he always did. Alana listened, sometimes nodding, answering something. She didn't cry, she didn't beg, she didn't argue. It was useless. Kevin had decided everything for the two of them. You could see it in his eyes, hear it in his voice, read it in every gesture. "I met someone else, and I had strong feelings for her. I didn't expect that to happen in my old age," Kevin admitted. Alana didn't cry, but she was dying inside. She realized that the old Alana was gone. Kevin was everything to her. She had no idea how to live without him. But he had made his choice, and nothing could stop it. The man couldn't hide a smile while talking about his new love. "This is something incredible. Alana, you're going to have to leave my company. You're just going to quit. She'll be working here now. And you and I can't see each other all the time. It's going to be hard on both of you. And on me, of course. Alana nodded, barely holding back tears. I feel so bad about all this, Alana thought. It's going to be okay, Alana smiled, trying not to show how hard it was for her. She didn't want Kevin to feel sorry for her. Just not this. I'm sorry for what happened, but I've been honest with you. This is all very hard. I'll help you find another job. And you can stay in the apartment as long as you want until you find a new one, Kevin added. Thank you, Alana nodded. That was it. Alana's past life was over. She wouldn't stay in the apartment that held so many happy moments. The woman left for another city where nothing would remind her of Kevin. And it wasn't easy. They lived together for almost 15 years. And Alana got used to Kevin, to the joint life with him, thought it would last forever. But everything changed in an instant. Alana found an apartment in a new city thanks to her savings and started looking for a job. She faced a hard truth: it was not so easy to find a job in her specialty. Almost 15 years of working as a secretary did not give her a chance, because there were few suitable vacancies, and she could not do anything else really well. So Alana became a kitchen assistant at a local restaurant. Her job duties ranged from making sure the floors were clean to washing dishes and carrying pots. She did whatever was asked of her. Alana was always ready to work. The work was hard, and at the end of the day her back ached and her legs rang. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to rent a small apartment. And of course there was a nice bonus of taking home leftovers at the end of the day. For Yana, with her limited budget, this was really valuable. Did she miss her former life, a comfortable apartment, traveling, shopping in expensive stores? Probably not. Of course she was sad, but not for the lost prosperity that Kevin had provided. She missed Kevin himself, despite the way things had ended. Alana still loved him so much that even the thought of other men seemed impossible to her. Her friends advised her to get on with her personal life, but her heart wouldn't listen. Sometimes Alana imagined that something would happen to Kevin, that he would lose everything: money, business, house. Naturally, his new girlfriend would immediately leave him. Alana believed she was only with him for the money. As for Kevin's wife, Cynthia, she apparently didn't care about his adventures. Alana, unlike her, would forgive Victor anything and gladly take him back. But those were just fantasies, she was well aware of that. Time passed, and Alana's mental wounds healed, turning into scars. She lived alone, almost reaching her 40s, without children, without a husband, without a profession to be proud of. The absence of a loved one to care for, and who would care for her, was hard on Alana. The loneliness frightened her. Could she fall in love with someone else? There were no suitable candidates in her surroundings. After everything with Kevin, Alana realized that true love existed, and she could no longer settle for anything less. Alana couldn't bring herself to get over the separation. There were new joys in her life books. She became a frequent visitor to the local library. Alana absorbed the works, got acquainted with the inner world of the classics, and through the prism of events in their novels and stories, she rethought her fate. In her school years, Alana did not pay much attention to literature. All these works seemed boring to her, and she did not understand half of the words. However, apparently now it was the right moment for reading. In addition, Alana had a cat, Naomi, who turned out to be a very intelligent and affectionate animal. When Alana came home sad, Naomi would start rubbing against her legs, as if trying to comfort her. And when the mistress felt tired, the cat became inaudible and unnoticeable. One cold fall evening, Alana prepared a delicious dinner for Naomi from leftover red fish and beef scraps. She took something from the table for herself, too. I wondered how much food was left over after working in the kitchen. It turned out to be a decent savings on food. Alana buttoned her jacket up to her chin and pulled her hat over her ears. She didn't feel like going outside. The wind was making the windows shake, and it looked like it was going to rain. But staying at work overnight wasn't an option. Naomi, her favorite book, and the soft couch were waiting for her at home. It was cozy and warm, though very lonely. It wasn't that far to walk, only a couple of blocks. Alana had chosen an apartment near the restaurant, saving not only on food but also on transportation. It was already dark outside. The evening was almost pitch black. It felt like winter was approaching. Soon the snow would fall, and the streets would become bright and colorful, and the New Year mood would appear. But so far it was dirty and slushy, uncomfortable. In such weather, I wanted to be home sooner. The streets were deserted. No wonder, because the cold, nasty rain had started. The icy wind burned my cheeks. As she passed the playground, which in the darkness looked like the set of a horror movie, Alana hurried home. When she heard that voice, a weak, trembling voice that sounded desperate, "Help, please. I'm hungry," Alana stopped. It was very unexpected to hear a voice clearly belonging to a small child on the street in this weather. There were no adults around, and Alana didn't see the owner of the thin voice either. "Can you help?" A girl came out of the cabin of the wooden-colored ship that stood proudly in the playground. A little girl altogether. She looked no more than 5 years old, huge, frightened brown eyes, plump lips, beautifully arched eyebrows. Tangled strands of brown hair were poking out from under a stretched cap. The girl was wearing a gray boy's jacket, which was 2 sizes too big for her. On her feet she wore sneakers that were worn almost to the ground. All indications were that she came from a poor family. If she had a family at all, she probably should. Children don't happen by themselves or grow up in an orphanage, or close adults raise them. The girl looked at Alana studyingly, as if trying to figure out whether she was friend or foe. What are you doing here?" Alana finally said. "Sitting, walking down the street. Suddenly it started raining and the wind picked up, so I hid here." Where are your parents?" "My mom died and my dad disappeared somewhere. First we took a long train ride with him. The train was great, it was warm, the bed was clean, there was plenty of food. We were going to Grandma's, that's what Dad said. And then we got off the train. Daddy told him to wait for him and left. So I went to look for him. Only he was nowhere to be found." "Why did you leave? Daddy must have come back for you, but he didn't find you. Now he's worried, running around looking for his daughter." I waited a long time. The little girl shook her head. "We got here this morning. I had already left the station at night when it got dark." That did seem strange. Alana could understand if the man had left his daughter for a few minutes to, I don't know, go to the bathroom or drop off things at the luggage room. But according to the girl, she waited for her parent all day. "He left me." I guess the little girl sighed. "Daddy doesn't love me. It's Mom loved, but she died already. And Daddy, I heard him tell a friend of his that I was a burden to him." "So what are we going to do with you now?" Alana didn't know what to do. Leaving the girl out here in the cold wasn't an option. That was for sure. Dragging the child to the police wasn't an option either. The baby needed a good dinner and a warm bed right now. She'd have to sit on some chair all night at the station while they drew up a report, while they figured out where to put her, while they called the guardian or whoever they called in such cases. "Let's go to my place now," Alana finally decided. "We'll eat, watch TV. I have a cat, you can play with it. And tomorrow we'll go to the police. And the police uncles will decide what to do with you." "The police?" The girl immediately tensed up. "You don't have to go to the police. I haven't done anything wrong." Alana realized that the little girl was afraid of policemen for something. Most likely she had transferred such an attitude to law enforcement representatives from her parents. Perhaps they were doing something criminal. It's very likely. Normal people don't put their children in this situation. "The cops are kind and good," Alana reassured the little girl. "We'll ask them to find your daddy." "Okay." Yes, the little girl nodded and added, "I'm really hungry. Auntie, do you have any sausage at home?" Alana's heart clenched with pity for this hungry, abandoned child. Somehow she reminded her of herself as a child, needed by no one, forgotten and abandoned by everyone. Alana held out her hand to the girl, who smiled and clung to it happily. Along the way, Alana and the girl got to know each other. She knew her name, Emma, but she couldn't say her last name. That was strange for a rather small child of 5. Emma told a little about her life. At first, the little girl lived with her mom and dad somewhere in a village or on the outskirts of a small town. Her parents apparently drank. Emma mentioned noisy companies, fights, people falling asleep on the floor, including complete strangers. And in all of this, a small, defenseless child was growing up. Listening to Emma, Alana thought about how lucky she was to be in her aunt's family as a child. And she wasn't exactly loved and certainly not spoiled, but she'd never witnessed a scene like Emma's, either. Emma was taken to work almost every day. As Alana understood it, her parents would take her to the center of a small town and leave her at a crosswalk to beg for alms. Emma was given a lot. Of course they did for such a doll. Brown eyes alone. In general, Emma had a hint of oriental blood-dark skin, coal black eyelashes and eyebrows. She looked like a beautiful, expensive doll. And she was not cherished, not appreciated. Emma should go to kindergarten, wear smart dresses, play with her friends. She is so energetic, smart, curious. But the girl had to spend her days in a dark underpass and beg for change from passers-by. "Didn't they hurt you there?" Alana asked. "Little could happen on the street to a small child?" No, Emma shook her head. Everyone knew me in the crosswalk already, my uncle, the guitar player, and my aunt. She sold knitted socks in the crosswalk. And my dad often came to check up on me. In the evening, Emma's family returned home and went on as circumstances dictated. Sometimes Emma was left alone for a few days in an empty house. Her parents went out with someone. Other times, the company would gather at their place. Emma didn't know any other life, so she talked about everything that happened to her easily and casually. It was the norm for her. Meanwhile, Alana's hair was standing on her head in horror. What a lot of things had befallen a small child. And then Mommy died. Emma sighed. Daddy said it was bad vodka. And God saved him. He'd fallen asleep before that bottle was opened, so he survived. But Mom didn't sleep. So her friends got poisoned. Emma missed her mother very much. According to the girl, her parent loved her, treated her with candy, called her a beautiful princess, made beautiful ponytails. But sometimes she beat her, of course. It usually happened on days when Emma wasn't served enough. But if they served a lot, kissed and hugged, sang songs to her daughter and looked at her with kind eyes. Daddy's not like that. He never hugged me, and he never sang songs to me, and he never told me fairy tales. He doesn't love me, but still he's my daddy, and he takes care of me. Now he's lost or left me because he doesn't need me. They finally made it to Alana's apartment. "You come on in, don't be shy. See, Naomi's meeting us, already missed you." Emma seemed to be in a normal apartment for the first time. Everything here seemed unusual, strange and wonderful to her. Simple things made the little girl really excited. Like the lamp on the wall or the toaster or the bathroom. Alana immediately filled it to the brim with warm water to wash the girl. Everything. Alana wrapped Emma in her robe and carried her little guest into the kitchen. Dinner from an expensive restaurant was already waiting for her. Here, grilled vegetables, chicken kebab, fruit. At the sight of this variety, Emma was even confused. "Is this something you can eat?" "For me," she asked. You, Alana smiled. "You should try it. It's really good." Emma greedily pounced on the food. It was immediately apparent that the little girl had been starved. And then Alana put Emma to bed in a makeshift bed made from 2 upholstered armchairs. She didn't have a second bed in the apartment. "I love it so much at your place," the sleepy little girl admitted. "May my daddy never be found at all. I want to stay with you." These words echoed warmly in Alana's heart. She was pleased that Emma liked it at her place. On the other hand, one should never get attached to the little girl. She'd have to go to the police with her tomorrow anyway. That's a shame. What a pleasure it is to take care of a child, to see its happy eyes, to open the world to it. I can't tell you how it feels. Even if only for one evening, but Alana felt like a mother of a wonderful girl. In the morning, she had to dress up the baby in her old dirty clothes. There were no other clothes. Alana asked for time off work and explained the situation. They were sympathetic and gave her advice on how to talk to the police so that they would not think that a kind woman had taken someone else's child. Alana was surprised. She had never even thought of such a possibility. At the station, Alana went to the duty officer and told him her story. He, surprised, looked at the 2 visitors with his eyes and called someone. Then he called the number of the office and let the woman with the child behind the desk. The young man in shoulder straps listened to her, then asked Emma a few questions before writing down Alana's details and suggesting she go home. What about the girl? Alana was no longer indifferent to Emma's fate, especially since the girl clung so trustingly to her hand. How is it to go and leave her here with strangers? The little girl's been through enough. "Can I take her? I promise I'll be in touch with you 24 hours a day." and I'll take the baby anywhere at the slightest need." The policeman shook his head negatively. You could see in his eyes that he'd love to help Alana and Emma, but he wasn't supposed to. "I want to take her away," the words came out of Alana's mouth before she could think. "To adopt her. If her parents can't be found, I'll take custody of the child, temporary, permanent, whatever, just so long as she's with me." "Are you sure?" The policeman looked at Alana in surprise. "More than sure. I don't want her in an orphanage or hospital. Let her go through all the necessary procedures at my place. I'll sign everything that needs to be signed. Certificates will be provided." "We'll keep that in mind." The policeman nodded and made some notes on the report. But Emma still had to spend about a month with strangers. First, she was admitted to the hospital in what was called the quarantine block. There, the girl was examined from top to bottom. It turned out that her health was excellent. Then Emma went to the orphanage. Alana visited the little girl almost every day. When Emma saw her, she would rush to her and hug her tightly. It was such a sweet moment. Alana always brought her some sweets or interesting toys. It was a joy to see the child's eyes light up with joy. All this time, Alana was preparing the documents for the adoption of the girl, collecting the necessary certificates, visiting the school of foster parents. She could not imagine that Emma would live with someone else. And the girl herself was drawn to Alana with all her soul. It's a pity that a 5-year-old's opinion won't be taken into account in court. If only she were 10. The search for Emma's father was not progressing. The orientation letters, interviews with possible witnesses, posters on the poles, and TV stories did not give any results. Emma's parents seemed to have fallen through the cracks. Alana was inclined to think that the little girl was right. The father had really abandoned his daughter, just left her at the train station in a strange city. A great plan if you want to never be found. Alana's adoption was going to be a problem. Single woman, no place of her own, low paycheck. Everything was looking up for Emma to be sent to an orphanage. Angry children, angry teachers of state rank. Alana could not imagine Emma, tender little Emma, in such conditions. Sure, the little girl had been through a lot in her 5 years, but she still had parents who took care of her as best they could. Yes, Alana realized that no one would really appreciate and love the girl in the orphanage. Her colleagues advised her to hire a lawyer specializing in such cases. The services of a professional cost a lot, but Alana even sold old jewelry, once given by Kevin, to pay for the work of a lawyer. The lawyer had to work hard, but in the end Alana received the court's opinion on Emma's adoption. For her, it was like a mountain had fallen from her shoulders. Now she and Emma would be together, and the girl would not end up in an orphanage. Alana immediately went to the orphanage to take Emma home. The girl even cried from joy, hugging Alana and saying that she would never come back here again. At home, Alana prepared everything for the arrival of the little girl: a new bed with linens, a closet with beautiful dresses, a desk. She fulfilled all the requirements of the guardianship authorities, creating a cozy and comfortable corner for Emma. And it gave Alana great joy to take care of the child, to choose toys and books for him. Alana's new life began. Emma turned out to be a wonderful child, perky, but able to keep herself in control, inquisitive and kind. She tried to take care of Alana, which moved the woman to tears. Alana had a family now, and she was happy. Emma finally went to kindergarten, where she immediately made many friends. The energetic, intelligent girl was always the center of attention. She invented games and activities that attracted children to her like a magnet. Alana couldn't get enough of her daughter. Emma didn't remember much about the past. It was as if she had decided to forget everything that had happened before she met Alana. And she had. Only sometimes she fidgeted restlessly in her sleep and soon calmed down. Probably all the same, in the subconscious remained some not too pleasant memories of life with her parents. But in the morning the girl could not say what she had dreamed. Alana was very careful to ask her about it, but she just shook her head. In due time, Emma went to school. And then it turned out that the girl has a great ability to do math. While others were solving simple examples, she, having coped with the obligatory part of the tasks, was studying Olympiad tasks for children a couple of grades older than herself. The teacher immediately recognized the talent of the little pupil and tried to develop it in every possible way. In middle school, Emma became interested in computer science and programming. Alana looked at her daughter and could not help but wonder how all these complex formulas and algorithms fit into the head of a 13-year-old. The woman herself was panicked by the sight of code, but Emma, with the keen look of a drummer, fingers on the keys, solved one complex problem after another. Emma became a prize winner of local and regional Olympiads more than once. Teachers believed that the girl had a great future. Alana was in solidarity with them. She was proud of her daughter and loved her very much. She was also worried about her daughter. Like any mother, this feeling was a bonus to the happiness of motherhood. There was no other way around it. Alana wondered how such a child could come from a family of marginalized people. These people abused booze, did not care about their daughter, did not engage in her development. The girl from an early age begged for alms in the underpass. Where did she get such abilities? It seemed strange to the woman. But there was no time to think about Emma's fate. Alana had to work even harder now. She wanted to dress Emma in beautiful, fashionable clothes, feed her daughter delicious and healthy food. She needed money for all that. So Alana did the best she could. It was hard to be alone, but the woman did not regret anything. On the contrary, she considered herself lucky. Fate had given her such a magnificent gift. It was an ordinary fall evening. Emma was already asleep with her hand under her cheek, just like when she was a child. Wow, how fast children grow up, Alana thought. 8 years had flown by. Emma had grown from a touching little girl into a beautiful young woman. Huge brown eyes, long shiny hair the color of melted chocolate. Slender, tall, dark-skinned. The admixture of Oriental blood gave the girl's appearance a special flavor. The beauty, and what a clever girl. Yes, nature had not been stingy, generously endowing Emma with everything at once. Alana smiled and returned to the laptop screen. The woman was trying to find the TV series she'd been told about at work. The search engine, as usual, produced a lot of unnecessary stuff. Alana was about to close the page, but then her eyes caught on a picture. The woman looked at it and could not believe her eyes. A teenage girl, slender, with long brown hair and a dazzling smile, posed in a bright pink swimsuit on the ocean. The wind ruffled the young beauty's hair. Behind her, the waves splashed and it was Emma. The same facial features, the same smile, even the proportions of her figure were the same. But how is that possible? Her girl had never been to the sea. There's the ocean, white sand, palm trees. The longer she looked at this girl, the more she was surprised. The teenager didn't just look like her daughter. This was Emma. I could even see the mole on her thigh. Emma had one just like it, she thought. Alana pulled away from the screen and took a few deep breaths. This couldn't be a coincidence. Gathering her wits, Alana clicked on the photo. It opened the social network of one Nikita Gortsev. Apparently the girl was his daughter. On the page of this stranger there were more photos. Some of them had Sonia, so the name of the young beauty, posing against the ocean. Alana wasn't good at Russian, but she could understand it from the captions on the pictures. The family lived in a large and beautiful house, traveling. Father, mother, and daughter Sonia were a happy family. Sonia, who looked uncannily like Emma, attracted attention with her exotic beauty. The mixture of blood had a spectacular result. Alana could not take her eyes off Sonia, because the girl was an exact copy of Emma. Sonia's father apparently worked in the field of technology, as evidenced by the photos on his page. Interestingly, Emma also had a knack for programming. Alana made up her mind. She sent Nikita a letter in English without translating it through translators, attaching a few photos of Emma. In the letter, she told her girl's story. It could have all been a coincidence, but something told Alana that such coincidences simply do not happen. Nikita replied right away. He thanked Alana and asked her to stay in touch. He wrote that he couldn't tell her everything yet, but he wanted to meet her and was even ready to come to America for that. He was going to do it as soon as possible. Alana answered him and turned off her computer. What had just happened? Why did she immediately, without thinking about the consequences, wrote Nikita this letter? What would happen now? Alana's heart clenched with icy anxiety. She wanted to rewind time and not send a stranger from the internet that letter. But Alana had always acted in her daughter's best interests, believing that every decision she made would only benefit Emma. And this time Alana did the same, guided by her concern for Emma's future. The adoptive mother tried to give her daughter everything she could, but there was often not enough money for participation in competitions and tournaments, for traveling and new impressions. The possibility that a wealthy programmer from Moscow, who seemed to have some connection with the fate of Emma, could take part in the girl's life seemed unlikely, but so necessary. In the morning, after a restless night, Alana told Emma everything. The girl stared in wonder at the open social media pages, taking in the unknown details that seemed strangely familiar. "I think I remember these places. Or rather, not like that. I don't remember, but I dream about something like this house sometimes." Unsure, of course. Maybe just something similar, Emma pondered. Her remark about everyone having a double added a mystical tinge to the story. When Nikita flew in, the tension reached a climax. His interest in the details of Emma's fate, his desire to know every detail of how Alana had found the girl, had filled the meeting in the cafe with a sense of foregone conclusion. Nikita was completely different from Emma, tall, trim, with blue eyes and blonde hair. His appearance was not associated with the dark-haired, brown-eyed girl. What had happened during this encounter? Could Nikita have shed light on the unusual resemblance between Sonia and Emma? Is there some deep, hitherto unknown connection behind it? The questions were many, and the answers were bound to follow. The world Alana and Emma were entering promised to be filled with new discoveries, and perhaps changes that would change their lives for the better once and for all. And yet the attentive Alana noticed the similarities, the dimple in Nikita's cheeks when he smiled, and his eyes. The man nodded in the exact same way. Even his nose seemed to wrinkle in the same way. It turned out that Nikita knew English. He had worked for a long time with English developers and had learned the language. Of course, the man confused words and cases and spoke with a strong accent, but Alana understood him perfectly. "This is just an incredible story," Nikita pronounced as they settled at a corner table. "I couldn't believe my eyes at first when I saw your daughter's picture. What a blessing that you wrote to me." Alana nodded. She wasn't sure she had done the right thing. It seemed to her that her life was taking another turn. Things were about to change abruptly again, and not for the better. She felt like she might lose Emma. The feeling was strong, and of course she already guessed that Emma was no stranger to this man. Nikita made a pleasant impression. He was handsome, polite, energetic, and very friendly. Alana almost physically felt the warmth emanating from him. There was nothing repulsive or suspicious about him to fear or antipathy. And then he told his story. Alana caught every word greedily. A lot of things fell into place now. The puzzle was coming together, but what to do next? Jonathan was a talented programmer. After high school, he moved to Moscow, where he first attended university and then got a job. He bought a house, married the beautiful Maria. His career was going uphill. The young, talented programmer was entrusted with complex projects, and one day he got into a team that cooperated with developers from America. They all worked together on a grandiose international project. In his personal life, Nikita also had everything going as well as possible. The young family was born at once 2 twin girls. Nikita and his wife Maria were happy, healthy, beautiful daughters, financial prosperity, love and mutual understanding between spouses. What more could one wish for? When little girls Sonia and Kira were 2 years old, Nikita was sent on a business trip to California. It was necessary to solve several work issues, a matter of a few hours a day. The man still had a lot of time left to get acquainted with this beautiful city. "So I made the huge mistake of asking Maria and the girls to come with me," he recalls. "That trip was supposed to be an exciting journey, but it turned out to be a real nightmare for our family. At first, everything was going just fine. Nikita would drive 2 or 3 hours to the office in the morning and then spend the entire day with his family walking around California. They visited the zoo and gallery together, walked around the center. True, having 2 young children meant more than just doting, joy and happiness. Both young parents were tired, which was probably what caused them to let their guard down. It happened in a huge, beautiful park with fountains, wide, flat paths and playgrounds. There were a lot of people in the park that sunny day, no surprise, since the weather was great and the weekend was ahead. Parents seemed to have decided to take their children out for a walk. Nikita was holding Sonia's hand and thought that his wife was also holding Kira's hand. But Maria and his daughter disappeared from his sight for a while. The sea of people had swept them in different directions. Kira had always been more curious and energetic than Sonia, always running somewhere, climbing, Maria was better at handling her. I thought Kira was dragging her wife off to find adventure again. It happened so often. I wasn't worried at all, Nikita continued. 5 or 6 minutes passed, no more. When Nikita finally saw Maria, she was standing at the monument, looking around for her family. Seeing Nikita, the woman smiled and rushed towards him. She was alone, without Kira. Nikita tensed, of course, but didn't panic yet because, well, little else, maybe Kira stayed on the swings or goes like a tail behind her mother's back and just can't be seen. "Where's Kira?" she asked anxiously, looking at her husband. And then Nikita realized everything and jumped up in horror. Maria thought that Kira was with him, and he thought that the daughter had stayed with his wife. The little girl was lost, and it had been about 7 minutes, if not more. How do we find her in this huge park with so many people? What to do? These questions instantly filled his head. Nikita immediately called the police. The call was responded to lightning fast, because it was about the disappearance of a small child. An outfit arrived at the park. At first, everyone hoped that the girl quickly found just lost, just wandering somewhere along the paths, admiring the surroundings, studying the world. It was quite in the character of Kira. But the little girl, as if in the water, rolled into the water. It soon became clear that something had happened to her. We had to return home after a month, Nikita continued. We left with nothing. We didn't know where our little girl was or what had happened to her. It was horrible. We can't even find words to describe our condition with Maria. We couldn't find a place to sleep. We couldn't sleep. We couldn't sleep. We didn't eat anything, and we blamed each other. He told how he was constantly in touch with law enforcement, even hiring private detectives. They worked on the case too, but not a single lead. As the years passed, there was little hope of finding Kira. Sonia grew from a little girl into a beautiful young woman. Looking at her, Maria and Nikita could only imagine what their Kira looked like now. Maria always felt that Kira was alive. Nikita shook her head. She didn't doubt it, and she was right, Alana pronounced. Emma is Kira. There could be no doubt about that. Then, years ago, the little girl was taken from the park. The girl was probably too young to pronounce her name correctly. And the people who took her decided her name was Emma, not Kira. Well, or they just called her their own name. Emma didn't remember anything. She was just a little girl, barely 2 years old. She gradually got used to the new mommy and daddy and learned the language. Their goal, apparently, was to make her not just a well-behaved child, but a full-fledged member of society. It was probably for this purpose that the girl was taken away. But then something went wrong. Emma's mother died, and the father, perhaps having found another way to earn money, realized that the girl no longer interested him. So he brought her to the train station, far from the city, where he left her mercilessly. Then Emma was found by Alana. All this time in Moscow, the girl's real parents found no place for themselves. They, of course, had to learn to live with this loss, but I know I could not. I didn't even want to imagine what Maria and Nikita had endured, to know nothing about the fate of their own child. Yeah, it would drive you crazy, Alana thought. Especially they may have been saved by the fact that they still had another daughter, Sonia. She was the one they were holding on to. And then I get this letter from you, Alana. And I see a picture of Emma. I'm sure your Emma is Kira. I haven't told my wife anything yet. I need to check it out first, do a DNA test to be sure. If there is a mistake, Maria is unlikely to stand for it. Nikita continued. There was no mistake, of course. The analysis confirmed Emma and Nikita's parentage. I honestly told everything to my daughter. The woman was naturally worried. Everyone realized that now that Emma's birth family had been found, Alana would be alone again. How am I supposed to live without my daughter now? How do I tear her from my heart? Alana agonized. But I have to do it. Emma is not my property. It is important that she lives with her blood relatives. With them, she will get more than I can offer. A brilliant future indeed awaits her with them. And so I watch as Emma begins to socialize with Nikita. You can immediately sense a kindred spirit in their interactions. Emma spoke to her father as if the years of separation had never happened. They laughed at the same jokes, discussed programming languages, argued over solving complex Olympiad problems, understood each other with half a word, even with half a look. I immediately realized that Emma was 100% Daddy's daughter. The woman wasn't jealous. No, she was happy for the girl. Emma's going to be really happy now. The paperwork took a while to finalize. Emma continued to live with Alana. Nikita preferred to stay in a hotel so as not to embarrass the hostess. They saw each other every day, walked, talked, discussed the future. Emma is leaving with her father. It was already a settled matter. The girl looked forward to seeing her mother and especially her sister Sonia. She was a little worried, but she lived the days before departure in joyful anticipation. After all, the girl would soon have a whole new life. But it was hard for Emma to part with Alana, the man who had raised her. "How will I be without you?" the girl sighed in the evenings. "I don't know what's happening to me. I seem to want to leave as soon as possible, to see how things work there, to meet my mother and sister. But I won't be happy without you." "We'll get used to it," Alana smiled. "And then, we'll see each other. I'll fly to visit you and you'll visit me here sometimes." "Oh, and Skype's still on too." "It's not like that, you realize that." Of course, Alana understood. She tried her best not to show Emma her sadness. Alana was used to having such a sweet little girl in her life. She had raised her, considered her a daughter, but that didn't give her the right to make Emma her property. Alana had made the decision that was most favorable to Emma, and now she had no doubt that she'd done the right thing. And then Emma and Nikita flew away. A cold emptiness appeared in Alana's soul at the same moment. Yes, once again a woman was starting a new life, and it would take some getting used to. Emma wrote and called often. She quickly learned the language and made friends. In fact, Alana had no doubt that she would. Emma talked about how much fun she was having in the new place, but she always ended the conversation by saying how much she missed Alana. If only she knew how much Alana missed her. A few months passed and New Year's Eve came. This time Alana decided not to decorate the tree. She always did it for Emma. Why would she do it now? Alana was spending the holiday alone. She'd been invited to a party, but she declined. She wasn't in the mood right now. She wanted peace, quiet, comfort. She wanted to sit quietly, watch the New Year's program on TV and think about her own thoughts. Just at that moment there was a signal that someone wanted to chat with Alana on Skype. The woman smiled. It was Emma, of course. There was no one else. Indeed, a smiling, sweet face appeared on the screen. Emma's eyes were shining, as always. Sonia loomed over her shoulder. Alana still couldn't get used to the fact that the sisters looked so much alike. They had become inseparable since their reunion. Emma wished Alana a happy new year, wished her happiness and good luck, told her again that she missed her, and then said that Nikita wanted to talk to her. Alana wasn't surprised. She often talked to both him and Maria. They told her about how things were going with Emma and constantly thanked her for saving their baby girl. Nikita probably wants to wish her a happy new year. There's nothing special about it. But from Nikita's face, Alana somehow immediately guessed that her life was kind of ready to take another sharp turn. The man looked too serious and determined. The woman's stomach even churned with an incomprehensible premonition. Nikita actually wished her a happy new year. And then, "Kira misses you very much." "Very much," he said, looking into Alana's eyes. "She has everything to be happy, but she's still not completely happy. She misses you," Nikita began. "Maria and I thought it would pass. We could just call each other, visit each other. But you two seem to have formed a strong bond. Kira, it literally splits in two. One part is reaching across the ocean to you, and the other part wants to stay with us. The children's doctor said it's very dangerous to her health." So then Nikita made Alana an offer she just couldn't refuse. It turns out that not far from them sold a few years ago a small house with a plot of land. And Nikita bought it, counting on the fact that Sonia, having lost one of their daughters, will stay to live with them, even after becoming an adult. So we bought this house, where, according to our plan, adult Sonia was to live with her husband and children. But Sonia and Kira are still just kids. Besides, they both already said they're not going to live in our neighborhood. They both have grandiose plans to conquer the world. And our cozy neighborhood is too crowded for them, you see. Anyway, the house was idle. "We're asking you to move in," Nikita finished. Alana looked at Nikita in silence. She didn't even know what to say. His words were too good to be true. Is she really going to live next to Emma? Yes, she'll have to get used to everything new, learn the language. But that doesn't matter. If Alana gets a chance to talk to her girl every day. There are jobs for you here. A lot of families need a nanny. You have experience. Besides, there are a lot of restaurants here that are always in need of kitchen helpers. Kira said you're the one for the job. Nikita continued. So are you going to take it? There's nothing keeping you in your town. And this way you'll be close to Kira. The girl is very attracted to you. She needs you, and we need you. Marie and I also want to do something good for the man who saved our daughter. We're one family. Now the house sits idle for nothing anyway. You'll take care of it too, so you'll help us a lot. So what do you think of my offer? Nikita looked at Alana hopefully and waited for an answer. She probably should have said that she needed to think about it, to weigh the pros and cons. But why? After all, the decision had already taken shape in her head. This was just great news. Of course I agree, Alana said without a shadow of a doubt. Her answer was full of determination and joy. The prospect of living near Emma and becoming even closer to the family that had welcomed her so warmly seemed like a marvelous opportunity. It wasn't just an offer to move in, it was a chance to start a new life where she would not only take care of the house, but also help with Emma's upbringing, support her, and be there to experience all the important moments of her life. Nikita smiled back, feeling relieved and happy about her decision. That's wonderful, Alana. We're so excited to have you become a part of our life here on a permanent basis. Kira will be thrilled. It was a new beginning for Alana, full of promise and opportunity. A new page in her life was opening before her, filled with family warmth, new challenges, and most importantly, the happiness of being close to those she loves. Liz never regretted trading her family for science. And how did she do that? That's what people said. She was sure that both could be perfectly combined, just that her life's work had to come first. Because the family, if you make a step aside, let go, so to speak, the reins, it will not go anywhere from you, but science. Just dare to be not diligent enough of its student and faithful adherent, but just dare. You'll find yourself on the margins. No, Liz had never regretted that her calling had come first. Not until a sudden severe illness had turned her whole world upside down. And now she wondered if it was her own fault that her family treated her so badly. Maybe she should have given more love? Although, she did love. And did she really deserve everything that was happening to her? Liz Tyler had been born into a special kind of family, where whatever generation she came from, whatever branch of the family, they would all be intelligent people. The cream of the crop, so to speak. In any case, it had been so since the end of the 18th century and up to the 20s of the 20th century. And then, in connection with the well-known historical events, much of course changed. The family thinned out. The family was scattered all over the world. Then, however, by the 60s, many things seemed to have been restored to the Tyler family, including a solid position in society, accumulation of all sorts of benefits. But still Liz remembered the words of her grandfather, who said that before, much earlier, everything was different. Liz's peers were not the same, in the sense that they didn't want to obey their elders and continue the family business. They invented all sorts of things. No, look at this. Liz's grandfather Elliot once resented, "How can you become a cook when I told you to be an archaeologist? Maybe you'll rediscover Babylon." And no cake for my anniversary. This bastard will not bribe me. That's how Elliot felt about his son, Uncle Liz. But then, by the way, he graciously forgave him and even admitted that he'd never eaten a cake as delicious as the one his son had made. But still, those were the days when not many people in the Tyler family were doing the great things of the past. Except that Liz was, as Elliot said, completely of their breed. Because she knew from childhood that she was going to be a historian. And she chose a difficult direction, the early Middle Ages in Europe, in its northern regions, with a special focus on folk culture, mythology, tales of that era. Liz remembered that day as if she were running along the path of their cottage, past the tall pines, to the brick house, which from afar looked like a fairy tale castle, so skillfully built was its roof with decorative turrets. This cottage, by the way, was not kept by relatives to whom it was inherited in the 90s, and some strangers sold it, and those even demolished it. They wanted to build their own. But it seems that they did not calculate the money, and then there was some small wooden house in this place. and on the place where there was a luxurious flower garden once greenhouses were put and grew vegetables for sale. "Grandpa," shouts Liz and throws herself at the old man's neck. "I've passed my last exam. I'm done studying." Elliot laughs, and although he is many years old, it seems like 100, he hugs his granddaughter tightly and pulls her off the ground, spinning her around as if she were 5 years old, and laughs back. What a clever girl. Our breed. Now there will be someone to pass on Princess Pelagia's gold to. Oh, that gold of Princess Pelagia. Tyler's main family treasure. It was said that once it would have been enough for a whole chest. There were heavy bracelets, many rings, necklaces, headbands, braid clips, brooches, precious shoe buckles. But by the will of fate, sometimes unfavorable, by the 70s of the 20th century, when Liz Young just graduated from the university, only a small part of it remained. However, Liz knew it was the biggest treasure in their family, and she was its main heir. And this gold, by the way, was not meant to be worn and walked around in. No way. It was supposed to be always, forever. Must be kept in a tiered casket, a kind of fancy wooden chest on velvet beds. According to family tradition, something of this splendor could be worn only once and only by one person, the eldest daughter or the wife of the eldest son on their wedding day. That's all. And the rest of the time, please keep the family wealth as it should be, because this is not some bling. Elliot's beloved grandfather died when Liz was 27. She'd been sad for him for a long time. Because, well, she'd had a good relationship with her parents, but Grandpa was the only one she'd ever been really close to among the entire Tyler family. Parents, by the way, were suddenly the people who wanted to sell the gold. You see, they wanted to buy a check-made wall in the hall, a German kitchen set, and also a car. My parents said that Grandpa was gone and therefore there was no point in following the bourgeois tradition. But Liz stood her ground. She declared that if they touched any of the set, she would no longer be their daughter. My parents were a little shocked. Mom cried and said that she had raised an egoist, dresser, and generally abnormal. Dad looked sternly, coldly, and said he didn't expect such a thing from his own daughter. Liz was both ashamed and... No, Liz was overcome by a thirst to preserve the memory of her grandfather and the family legacy. Liz had loved hearing the legend of how the gold had come into the family, and after that memorable fight with her parents, she had taken the box with it to herself. And all her life she kept it with her in a safe place. After graduation, Liz got a job as an assistant to a historian, Dan, a grandfather's acquaintance. Then, having gained experience and recognition, so to speak, in narrow circles, she began to teach at the university herself. She was known as a strict, ruthless teacher to her students. Liz did not want to get married. She was not interested in all this romantic fuss. But, still, youth took its toll, and at 32 she married Nick. Grandpa Elliot, by the way, this union would hardly approve, because Nick had nothing to do with the intelligentsia and was a hereditary worker. But he understood Lisa in everything, respected her choice, and they lived soul to soul for exactly 20 years. Until the accident happened, Nick died at work. Just scaffolding construction once collapsed. Meanwhile, it was already the 90s. Liz was left practically alone with her daughter Christy in her arms. While her husband was alive, she had not seen her daughter, but could continue to do her science. The child was looked after by a nanny. Now, there was no money for that. Liz was the sole breadwinner for her small family, and there were no relatives to help her. I mean, there were relatives, acquaintances, but in fact, she had drifted away from them over the years. In fact, no one was ready to take care of someone else's family. Many people considered Liz strange, almost insane, and reproached her for being too morbidly interested in her history, too high-minded about all the people of more, so to speak, ordinary professions. Liz, having lost her husband, felt the loneliness of it all. But then, after some grieving, she pulled herself together. There was no time to lose heart. She had to write a book about the Viking trek along the Silk Road. Having managed to save money, Liz hired a nanny again and returned to her craft. Her daughter was growing up. And too late, Liz noticed and realized how far she was from her own child. The revelation came suddenly, just one day, on the eve of Christy's high school graduation. Liz had told her to be careful at the party, not to drink any of that stuff, and to go home early. "You should have raised me earlier," snapped at her daughter. "You were never around. What do you know about me? I'm going to be 18 in a month, and that's it. I'm leaving." "Where are you going?" Liz asked in shock. "Anywhere. As long as I get away from here," Christy said and left, slamming the door. She said she would never be such a disgusting mother to her children. Liz felt very strange at the time. She was both angry and offended at her daughter. She was indignant at her ingratitude. She was fed, clothed as well as anyone else. Should we go to the sea every year for a vacation? Obligatory. With tutors to study to get prospects through education? Absolutely. In general, what was missing? Was it that her mother didn't play dolls with her until she was 14? What the hell is wrong with that girl? Liz hoped that Christy would calm down, apologize, and they would get on with their lives. She also hoped that Christy would stop fooling around and go into a normal profession and become a historian, for example, or maybe a cultural historian, as was the norm in her family. Liz would also approve of such professions as sculptor, architect, restorer. But her daughter was once again unpleasantly surprised. By deciding to become an accountant, the fact that she had carried out her threat and left home to a neighboring town, where she had settled in a dormitory. Liz took offense at first and then, well, she tried to get in touch. She sent her daughter money. It was well known that students needed it all the time. And slowly, as if they began to communicate a little better. But still, Christy made it clear that she had decided to live on her own and without any respect almost didn't give a damn about the family heritage. "Who's going to carry on our business?" Liz asked. "What business of ours?" Christy replied with a wicked grin. What a dynasty. They had lived in their own world for generations, despising everyone around them, and what had they done? Do you know that you are considered crazy, like your grandfather Elliot? And him and your great-grandfather. I don't care. What did he see in his life? Dusty books and shards of clay. He was talking nonsense. So Liz was left alone. Suddenly there were no people around. There was a job though, a destiny, a vocation. And she honestly tried to go headlong into it. All the more so when, after all these years, Grandpa Elliot's diaries turned up. The thing was that they had been handed down from an old friend of his who had died, and his heirs had decided not to throw away such antiques, but to give them to the person to whom they had once belonged. Liz was very surprised by this because she didn't understand why her grandfather would keep his diaries with a stranger, albeit a friend, a colleague. But she took them for herself. As a memory, I looked into them, of course. Most of it was really diary stuff about the weather, the minutiae of life. There were funny stories about lazy students trying to sneak cheat sheets in or cheat on exams, memories of the journeys Elliot had made in his life, some fairy tales written down there. Liz, who had a lot of her own things to do when she returned to the diary family, didn't have time for all that, so she put them away. Meanwhile, time flew by. The daughter, having finished her studies and not thinking of coming back, she decided to settle down in that foreign city. And there she met a man. Liz went and came back in tears because Christy had chosen the wrong man. You see, he was a new businessman. And in Liz's opinion, he looked like a gangster. And he was almost 20 years older than Christy. He was divorced and had a child from a previous relationship. His son's name was Joffrey. All in all, it was hardly a marriage to be happy about. Liz had even hoped that her daughter would come to her senses and divorce. But it didn't happen. But she had children, first a girl, whom she named Maggie, and then a son, Sami. "Maybe you should move to our town." One day on the phone, Liz suggested to her daughter, "I'd be closer to my family. I could help with the grandchildren." "Why, Mom, are you retired already?" Christy asked. "Would you give up your job to devote yourself to your grandchildren?" "What do you mean?" Liz didn't understand. "I was just thinking." "Don't think." Christy laughed. "What's the point of me living with you? To fill my children's heads with the same nonsense. You think I don't know that you can't help me? You couldn't raise your own daughter properly. What grandchildren for you?" However, fate had it that Liz did get close to her daughter's family, but it didn't work out the way she wanted it to. Christy had called one day and asked in an unexpectedly pitiful, begging voice if she could come to town with her husband's son from his first marriage. The thing was that the boy was diagnosed with a rare disease, and in that small town where Christy lived, just did not have the right specialists. "Well, come, of course. Everybody come." Liz rejoiced. That is, she was happy that her daughter was coming with her own grandchildren. And the arrival of that stranger's child, she wasn't happy at all. Christy arrived, taking up her room in the large 2-bedroom apartment where the Tylers had lived for decades. Liz did her best to make the guests feel welcome, putting the best stuff on the table, offering to show off the town to the guys. Except that neither Maggie nor Sami were particularly happy to see their grandmother. They did not look like loving grandchildren. They were capricious, ill-mannered, rude boys. Maggie, at 9, to Liz's horror, had no table manners at all, but she could swear foully and ugly. And Sami, who was 7, was always messing up all the things he could get his hands on. Joffrey, not her own grandson, was not the man Liz had expected him to be. He was a tall boy for his 12 years. He had blonde hair, glasses, and a nose full of freckles. He was quiet, polite, and silent. Unlike his brother and sister, he was the only one who said he would be happy if Grandma showed him the town. Liz shrugged and decided it wouldn't hurt her to take him somewhere. "Shall we go to the park?" she asked. "Would you like to go on the rides?" "Could we go to the art gallery?" Joffrey asked, and Liz opened her mouth. "I didn't expect that." While her own grandchildren spent all their free time watching cartoons and silly shows on TV, this grandson read books and listened intently and thoughtfully to Liz's stories about the Tyler family. Sometimes it seemed to Liz that Joffrey was even more like their family's ancestors than Christy and her children. Liz was genuinely concerned about Joffrey's health problems, and when it became clear that he needed money for his medication, she withdrew the necessary amount from her bank account without question. And when it was time for Christy and the kids to go home, Liz saw them off with tears in her eyes and called them to come back again. Time flew on. Liz was now fully retired. Age was making itself felt. What used to seem like a simple ailment suddenly became a disease. And although Liz still had acquaintances in her circle, the same scientists, but they were all old, and after she left the university, after she stopped working, communication with them slowly came to naught. But what was surprising and frightening at the same time for Liz was that it was as if she didn't notice the passage of time. That is, she realized, of course, that another year had passed, another year, and so on, but this realization came on abruptly and painfully, as if the passage of time was also a kind of disease. And sometimes, especially in the evenings, it was almost physically unbearable for Liz to be alone in the big apartment. Then memories came back, about how nice it used to be here. Lots of family, guests, friends. And now? Books and cupboards, statues, paintings, everything the Tylers had saved up, preserved with great effort over decades of family history. Liz wondered more and more often who would get it all after she died. What would become of it all? As time slowly moved on. One day, everything finally and abruptly changed. It was at the end of winter, when it seemed there was no ice left on the street at all. But Liz's foot somehow found it, and the old woman fell awkwardly. The ambulance took her to the hospital, and the doctors determined it was a very compound fracture first, and a damaged back second. Liz, feeling helpless, lonely, called her daughter. Yes, a social worker visited her, but it was clearly not enough. And then Liz made up her mind. Christy has had many changes in her life over the years, by the way. She separated from her first husband and remarried, and in pursuit of her feminine happiness, she moved far away. "What do you want?" "I can't just jump up and come to you," replied Christy to her mother. "Maybe you need to go to some pension for the elderly?" Christy said that she had no time and that she did not understand how a mother could be so irresponsible. After all, in the boarding house, at least care and supervision of her will be. But if she will sit alone in her apartment and something else happens to her, then how can she be? And then, a few days after this difficult conversation, Liz was contacted by Christy's children. Maggie called. The granddaughter seemed very disturbed by what had happened to her grandmother and said that here she was in person available and could come and live with her, look after her. "Thank you, darling. Come on over," Liz replied. Maggie said she would buy the tickets as soon as she hung up the phone. She added that she'd come with Sami because he needed to see his grandmother too. "And Joffrey should come too," said Liz. Maggie hesitated and said that, actually, Joffrey was busy at the moment he was studying. But then she agreed that yes, perhaps he should tell her what had happened. I don't understand you, though, Maggie added. Why? He's no one. Liz disagreed. She didn't think of Joffrey as a stranger. Even if they didn't see each other often, maybe once or twice a year, there was something about him that made him different from her grandchildren. Something that made her think of Elliot's grandfather. I mean, really, Liz had been looking at old photos recently and could have sworn that Joffrey and Elliot were practically the same face. Finally, the grandchildren had arrived. Liz was ready to forget all the misunderstandings they'd had in the past because now she didn't feel lonely again. Maggie quickly took matters into her own hands, asking how her health was doing. How was everything in general? After a few weeks, however, Liz also began to realize that things were not as smooth as they had seemed at first. For one thing, Maggie seemed to have little patience. No, she didn't insult her grandmother in a direct way, but she could give her a sharp answer and tell her not to bother her with silly conversations. Sami was almost never home at all, and when Liz tried to find out where her grandson was, Maggie replied that it was none of her business. The only person in whose company Liz felt truly comfortable was Joffrey. He was already 23 years old and was graduating from university, and he wanted to become a professional jeweler. It's a very good profession, Liz praised his choice once again. Our grandfather Elliot's great-grandfather's cousin was a jeweler. He even made jewelry for the English royal family. You're very capable, Joffrey. You'll do very well. Only Joffrey, by the way. Liz had shown the Tyler family treasure Princess Pelagia's gold more than once and more than twice. And only he willingly listened to the legend that told how they were created in the first place and how they got to the Tylers. Maggie and Sami, however, were also interested in gold, but purely for practical purposes. First of all, they asked what Grandma, she would bequeath them any of it, right? Liz was confused and replied confusedly that it went without saying that the jewelry would go to her relatives after her. Why don't you sell them now? Sami once asked, and his eyes ran strangely. Why shouldn't the gold sit idle? Liz gasped with indignation. How dare he call a centuries-old heritage just gold and say such a thing? At first, Liz thought that she would live much better in the company of her grandchildren, who had come to look after her while she recovered. But she soon realized that this was not the case. Somehow, very quickly, her pension was at the disposal of her grandchildren. And according to them, everything in the stores was terribly expensive, which is why her pension was running out so quickly. Liz, who used to buy everything herself before the grandchildren arrived, naturally wondered whether prices had risen so quickly. Well, Grandma, what do you want? Maggie shook her head. And besides, we look after you here. We don't work, by the way. We live on our own money. Do you think it's easy? What else was an old woman to do? She sighed and tried not to talk about money anymore, especially since there was still some savings in the account, so. Joffrey, I want to give you power of attorney for the money, Liz said one day. I don't want to say anything bad about your brother and sister. They're here. They're looking after me. They even took me to the clinic for scans. But only. Grandma Joffrey interrupted her. I realize that maybe I'm wrong to say this. Just don't encourage that couple too much, okay? And then Joffrey explained to the old lady what the matter was. And the point was that Maggie hadn't worked while she was living in her hometown. Yeah, she was a student. But then she was expelled for failing grades. And for a while she lived with her boyfriend, or rather with a man, a market trader, who was a good 10 years older than her. Then he kicked her out and Maggie went back to her father. Sami didn't go anywhere at all. It was like he was looking for himself. And Joffrey said that his half-brother had a bad habit of drinking, just like his father. How Liz gasped. I've never seen him drunk. He's clever, Joffrey explained. He drinks beer in the evening when no one can see him. But if he's like his father, he won't stop there. And you? Don't you drink? Liz asked cautiously. No, Joffrey shook his head and his eyes sparkled. My mother took me to an old man in the village when I was a child. He healed me of the scourge. I didn't realize you were so superstitious. Liz grinned. I'm not superstitious, I just use every opportunity to improve my life, said Joffrey thoughtfully, regardless of their origin, unless it's criminal, of course. Then the grandson returned to the subject of the conversation. He said that Maggie and Sami had discussed among themselves that, Theoretically, Grandma's apartment was worth a lot of money, and it was not wise for her to live here alone in her old age. He said they wanted to split it up and evict Liz. That's enough. Grandmother was suddenly angry she couldn't listen to any more bad things being said about her grandchildren. They weren't perfect people, but they were still her own blood. Suddenly Liz thought that maybe Joffrey wasn't entirely pure of spirit. Maybe he was deliberately speaking ill of his brother and sister. They're nobody to him. Maybe he's the one who wants to take over everything. Liz was so nervous that she said it all to Joffrey's face. He listened carefully. He didn't deny it, didn't take offense. He just said he was clean, he knew it, and that was enough for him. He had taken a leave of absence to look after his grandmother, and he seemed to be coping well with those duties. But if you trust them more than you trust me, if you think I'm unnecessary, then I can leave, Joffrey said quietly, leaving the room, and that was the end of their conversation. Liz's heart was troubled because she knew she had hurt her grandson, but she was also the kind of person who wasn't used to being the first to apologize. Liz's health, meanwhile, was getting better and worse. In fact, she could get up on her own. She could walk to the bathroom, to the toilet, but sometimes she was wobbly, dizzy, and Liz realized that at this rate she would be sick until the summer, and maybe even until the fall. And even more anxious in her heart, she realized what to do. Couldn't the young people really live here with her forever? But the thought of going to some specialized boarding house for the elderly was unbearable. Gradually, insomnia was added to the malaise. Liz could lie in bed until morning, remembering that. There was a time in her life. There had been a special time in her life when she had almost chosen a different fate for herself. She had barely been a student then. She came, I remember, to one of her first classes. "Move over, please," said young Liz to a young red-haired guy who was sitting at the desk and had so sat down, so arranged his books and notebooks, that there was no room for her. "You can do it," said the boy, and he looked up at her with his piercing evil eyes, which instantly made him look like a cunning fox. "I'll let you in for a kiss." Liz's jaw dropped at the insolence, the shamelessness. She was about to angrily reprimand the scoundrel, but then he smiled in a completely disarming way. "Just kidding. Sit down, of course." And she sat down. There was no time to look for another seat in the auditorium. The professor had already arrived. Soon Liz was informed by her classmates about who the redhead was. His name was Alex Weiss, and he was the son of a fashion model and a man from abroad, or rather a businessman from Sweden. Now he lived with his mother, but he often went to visit his father. His father often gave him gifts. That's why Alex was dressed fashionably and everything imported. That's why everyone wanted to be friends with him. "He's generous," said Lillian, one of the students. "He takes girls to restaurants." "I'm not going to a restaurant with him," Liz snorted. But it turned out that Alex had plans to go to a restaurant with Liz. He invited her, and also gave her flowers. She said no. Once, twice, a second time, a third time, a fourth time. "Okay," Alex said, and smiled as completely conquering as he had the first time. "Then let's go to my cottage." Liz almost hit him on the head with a bouquet of tiger lilies for such insolence. But Alex saved himself by quickly explaining the situation. His father had come to visit him. He and his mother had gone to the dacha and said that Alex could call all the friends he wanted. "There are a lot of old books there," Alex said. "I thought you might be interested in naming," and he named a couple of books that took Liz's breath away. They were terribly rare editions that even Grandpa Elliot didn't have. "Okay," she said, licking her lips nervously. "So it's no big deal? Just a visit?" "I swear I'll behave like a knight." He bowed jokingly. "Do you think I don't know what knights often seek before the lady of their heart?" Liz asked with a squint. She went to the cottage. And everything was really very decent there. They grilled kebabs, went boating, sang to the guitar by the fire. The young people didn't hooliganize, and the adults didn't disturb them. In the end, they themselves needed to be alone with each other. "How can your mother do that?" sighed Liz, who suddenly found this story of love with a foreigner very romantic. "Why didn't she go to him and take you with her?" "She doesn't want to. She has grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts, and other relatives here," Alex answered. "She says that I'll finish my studies and then I'll decide where I'll live." Then Alex took his special guest to look at books. Liz's hands were trembling with excitement. It was so magical to touch old books. And it turned out that she and Alex had more common interests than it seemed before. So he too knew the legend of Princess Pelagia's gold. However, he said that he had a book in which the legend is set out in a form somewhat different from the generally accepted version. And what is in it? Liz asked curiously. Alex told her everything and even let her read it. In the version that Liz had known since childhood, Pelagia was the only princely daughter, and the gold she had gotten as a dowry had been cursed by another maiden. That other maiden, named Amelie, was the daughter of a goldsmith and had the misfortune to fall in love with the same guy Pelagia had been married to. Legend has it that this curse was supposed to bring misfortune to the young family, but salvation came from the fact that Pelagia and Nick, although married by the will of their parents, but over time really managed to love each other, and that's why the evil spells were not afraid of them. And the Tylers, according to this legend, were the direct descendants of this very Pelagia. However, the book in Alex's collection said something different. Pelagia was the daughter of a prince, yes, that was true. And she had a fiancé who was married off. But Amelie was not the daughter of a goldsmith, but a girl from Pelagia's maids, and her love for Nikita struck her after he had become the husband of the prince's daughter. Amelie, consumed with jealousy, angry at the fact that life is so unfair, some all, and others nothing. Sometimes, when no one saw her, she took out the casket with Pelagia's dowry and tried on her jewelry, imagining that she had become so rich and noble suddenly, as in a fairy tale. One day she was caught by Nick himself. Naturally, the poor girl was frightened. But the young master was not angry. And then Amelie tried on the jewelry again. Now Nick himself allowed her to fool around like that, and also gave her a silk handkerchief, and by the way again asked for payment for everything in the form of a kiss. So it went on for a long time, until one day Pelagia suddenly found that from her chest of drawers missing ring with a ruby, and it was her favorite among all the magnificent jewelry. Naturally, they started looking for it. The ring was found in Amelie's mattress. Pelagia might have forgiven the poor girl, but she did not hold back and said everything she thought about her mistress, and also said that the young master became so cold to Pelagia because he had long loved another. At that time, by the way, Nick was not at the estate. He had gone hunting. Pelagia was furious. She said that if Amelie was so sure that Nick loved her, if she was so sure that he would save her from anywhere, if she wanted to own the gold herself. Well, you shall have it all, said Pelagia gloomily. She ordered the maid to be dressed in a silk dress, to braid pearls in her braid, and to put on her gold jewelry from the chest. And then she ordered her to take her into the forest and there to be chained to a tree, to leave her for the wolves to prey on. Let it be so, said Pelagia, looking at the unfortunate victim from the height of her raven mare, on which she sat in a lady's saddle of scarlet morocco. If Nick finds you, I will not interfere with your happiness. Run to the ends of the earth with him, and take the gold. I don't want it. It'll be yours. Maybe it'll bring you happiness. But if the wolves find you before, well then, that's your fate. And Pelagia and her faithful servants rode off. Amelie stayed in the thicket of the forest, and soon she heard the howling of wolves. She did not know that Nick was not so far away. He was hunting and just chased one wolf. It was a huge old beast. Nick and his friends had already killed its family, a she-wolf and her cubs, and now he was eager to get the skin of the beast. Nick had already imagined how he would dress it better and throw it at the feet of his Amelie. And it so happened that Nick's horse got ahead, and his companions, also dashing hunters, lagged behind. And then, suddenly Nick flew into the clearing. One awkward step, it was a hole, a burrow of some beast met, and the horse flew, fell down, the rider over his head tumbled. And then Nick, barely rising, saw what was happening in the clearing. He saw Amelie standing by a tree, and a wolf that stood on its hind legs and opened its huge, toothy maw, breathing in her face. Nick looked behind him for his bow and arrow, but both remained on the saddle and the horse. He had run away because he was afraid of the wolf. Nick reached for his belt. There should have been a dagger there, but he remembered that he had lost it in the battle with the she-wolf, and he realized that he was unarmed. "Don't touch her," Nick shouted, as if the wolf could understand human speech. "Let go of my beloved." and then I'll let you go." The beast clamped his ears, growled muffled, and then suddenly rushed into the thicket. Nick rushed to the girl. He untangled the ropes, patted her white cheeks, and brought her to her senses. Amelie told him everything. "Now you have nothing more to fear," said Nick. "Let's go out of the woods and then decide how to proceed." And they walked slowly. They thought that they were about to meet Nick's companions, but the forest was silent, as if it had all died out. The sun, meanwhile, was waning towards sunset, but before its disk touched the horizon, the edge of the forest appeared. Nick, with a joyful cry, rushed towards it. Just for a moment he took his hand away from Amelie's hand. Just for a moment he left it behind his back. There was a terrible cry. Nick turned around and saw that Amelie was lying on the ground, and above her standing the same wolf. The man and the predator looked into each other's eyes. And suddenly Nick's head was pierced by a sharp pain. A foreign, heavy, rumbling like thunder voice broke into it, which said, "You did not spare my beloved, my little ones. So why should I spare yours?" A moment later, the wolf took a powerful leap and disappeared into the forest. Nick rushed to his beloved, but Amelie was no longer breathing. And then the other hunters arrived. There were shouts, noise. But how much that wolf was not looking for, and could not find a single trace of it, as if through the ground fell through. Nick returned to his lawful wedded wife. He told her everything. "I will continue to be your husband," he said, and threw at her feet jewelry, which he took off Amelie. "But I'm afraid our bloodline is now cursed." Legend had it that the jewelry that had been preserved for posterity since Pelagia's time did not always bring misfortune to everyone. But sometimes it happened that they seemed to come to life. That is, the old curse came to life. And then families were destroyed because of the gold, and relatives began to fight among themselves like hungry wolves. Liz was very impressed with this version of the legend. It was much darker, and, despite all the folktale elements, somehow it even seemed more realistic. And since that day, Liz suddenly realized that she felt sympathy for Alex, and that sympathy soon turned into love. Except that love never had a chance. Because one day Alex announced that he had made a decision. He was going to his father. "It's better that way." "What about me?" Liz asked. "What if I ask you to stay?" "You're too young," he replied with a chuckle. "But we're about the same age," she objected indignantly. "You don't understand," Alex sighed. "You're a nice girl, Liz, but you and I, it's not going to work out. But you know what? Let me tell you something. I'll always be a good friend to you, even 100 years from now." "I'll need you in 100 years, old grandfather," Liz grumbled. Contrary to her own expectations, for some reason she didn't feel pain at the refusal, but only disappointment and some light sadness, as if this refusal was destined by fate itself. Alex said that he would always and forever remain her friend, and that if one day in her life there would be hard times, she could turn to him. And he even said that he would bequeath the same to his children, that they should consider Liz their friend, and if Alex was no longer in the world, that they would help her if she needed it. Liz said she only wanted Alex to leave her alone forever. But then, before he left, she added that it was okay. Maybe she would see him again someday. "I'm not coming for help," Liz said. "I'm inviting you to my wedding, so you can see how happy I've become." Liz had such big, bright plans for her life. But she didn't invite Alex to the wedding. She thought, why would she? Why bring up the past? They were so young and stupid, talking such nonsense. Some stupid oaths he'd made up about helping her. That's for legends and stories, not for real life. And then, the day after her wedding, Liz hid the sheet with Alex's address and phone number far away, at the bottom of the box where the gold was kept. Liz couldn't understand why she remembered that particular part of her life. And then she realized, because she couldn't help but wonder how things would have turned out if Alex had become her husband then, if he hadn't rejected her. Would she probably have a different daughter, not Christy, and different grandchildren? Maybe she would be sitting on a veranda somewhere in Sweden, surrounded by a large, friendly family and drinking tea, looking at the blossoming garden. And now what's here? Or, no matter how you spin it, you can't escape your fate. Some more time passed. And Liz began to notice that she was feeling better. Slowly, little by little, but she felt better. Now she could go out to the entrance and sit on the bench. But there were other grandmothers sitting there, and she had nothing to talk to them about, because they all talked about their own things about medicines, prices in stores, and she, Liz, was not interested in such things. But she, Liz, at least had some fun sitting like that. And then one day at home, a terrible thing happened. It all started with Sami coming home drunk. In fact, Liz had sent her grandchildren to the store to buy something for the festive table. Her birthday was approaching, and the old lady wanted to celebrate it modestly. But as it happened, Joffrey, who had left home earlier, he had gone to the other side of town to buy medicine for his grandmother. When he came back, he was furious. He started telling off his brother and sister. There was a fight. And then they all fought. And Liz was sure that Joffrey had started it. She'd yelled at him too, telling him to be more tolerant of his relatives. Tolerant? Joffrey was so indignant and tense that his face was even blotchy. What kind of people are they, Grandma? They should be thrown out. Oh, we're talking, Maggie said with her arms at her sides. You want to get your own place, don't you? What do you mean? Liz didn't understand. And then it was explained to her. It turned out that Joffrey had gone to the lawyers to consult. He wanted to know if it was possible to arrange it so that Liz could write a gift quickly, just. Anyway, he wanted her to give him the apartment. Grandmother Joffrey sighed. I can explain everything, really. You've got it all wrong. I just want to make sure. To keep you safe. If you gave me the apartment, they, he said, pointing his finger at his brother and sister, wouldn't be able to get it. They wouldn't be able to get it. And you would continue to live here in complete safety. And he also found out about the nursing home. Liz almost fainted at these words. She hadn't expected such treachery from the man she had thought for years to be better than her own grandchildren. Grandmother Joffrey stepped toward her, but Liz recoiled. I didn't ask about a nursing home, but about a clinic, a vacation home, so that you could improve your health and then. That's it. That's it. Get away from me. Liz was hysterical. What the hell are you thinking? No, you're not my grandson anymore. Maggie, granddaughter, take me to bed. I don't feel well. Joffrey tried to explain that his intentions were purest, that he just wanted to keep Liz safe from people who really wanted to hurt her. Except she didn't listen to him. She wailed, she cried. And then she told Joffrey in a harsh, scathing voice that she renounced him, that he was a stranger to her, and that she was sorry that her daughter, Christy, had been a good stepmother to such a monster for so many years. Joffrey listened attentively and silently. He didn't try to object. He didn't try to defend himself or justify himself in any other way. And Liz took it all as a confirmation of his guilt. Get out of my house, she said at the end. And the grandson didn't leave. He just packed up and left. Silently, without saying goodbye. Liz cried bitterly. Maggie fussed with her heart drops. Sami had said it was for the best, that everything would be all right now. What Liz didn't see was that her grandson and granddaughter looked at each other for a moment, and their faces contorted into a wicked grin. In the evening, Liz felt sick at heart and had to call an ambulance. The doctors, who had been briefed on the situation very roughly and one-sidedly, said that of course stress at that age is extremely harmful to the body, so the old lady just needed to rest. And for a few days, the sick Liz spent like in a dream. And then something else happened. That evening, it was raining outside the window. It seemed like a flood. There was thunder. All in all, it was a very unfavorable weather atmosphere. An hour ago, she had asked Maggie to make her some herbal remedies for insomnia, but her granddaughter had not yet fulfilled her grandmother's wish. And Liz had no idea why Sami had returned drunk again. Apparently, Maggie was having a talk with him now, as voices could be heard coming from the kitchen. Liz climbed out of bed. Overcome with weakness, she wanted a cup of tea. She could use a snack, like a cheese sandwich. But she did not dare to call Maggie again. She would rather let her brother take care of him. She must save the boy, lest he should get into this trouble. And she, Liz, would get there by herself. Nothing would happen to her. Noiselessly, the old woman left her room and moved, holding on to the wall, into the kitchen. She could hear the voices clearly now. It was only a short distance from the door to the kitchen, but then Liz froze, because strange words came to her ears. I'm sick of the old one, Maggie said. Cleaning her up, washing her. She stinks. I'm tired. All day long, I'm tied up at home like a leash. And I'm still young. I want to live. Yes, we've been sitting here too long, said Sami with a grin. Good thing that idiot left. I thought he would ruin everything. What are we going to do? Asked the granddaughter. The old woman's gold should be divided, and she should be taken to the city dump, said Sami. No, you imagine how much gold there will be there, eh? To the dump. Maggie repeated after her brother thoughtfully. You don't mean that literally, do you? And who knows me? Sami chuckled. Well, maybe not to the dump, but to a shelter. There are free do not know, and I don't want to pay. I'm sick of everything, said Maggie. I thought my grandmother would give me something to eat. Have you seen how many old books and clothes there are? What's the use? They're all junk. They should be taken to the dump. And sell the apartment. Sami banged his fist. Fool, said Maggie. Maybe there's something antique. Sometimes they pay big money for such things. The rich get fat, Sami replied. Something rumbled and clinked in the kitchen, as if they were pouring a drink from a bottle. It was about time that idiot was kicked out by his grandmother. He wanted to be the first to get a piece. Want some? Poor Maggie said. No, I don't think he wanted to steal. He probably wanted to save the old woman. What an idiot. Who the hell is he? Nothing, Sami chuckled. She kicked him out. Now he won't save her. Now we'll decide everything by ourselves. That's enough. The old woman has lived and lived. It's time for us to get everything. And the gold is the most important. Maybe it's worth $1 million. What do you think? Liz didn't remember how, but she walked quietly back. She closed the door and lay on the bed, stretched out on her back, her arms folded across her chest. She heard her heart thudding knock, 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 knock beneath her hands, and she thought it would stop once. And it would stop now. What she heard was like a forest fire that consumes the young growth. It was like a tub of water being splashed on a freshly painted canvas, and it washed away all the colors. Liz's world turned upside down, back and forth, spinning and falling somewhere. The old woman couldn't get it into her head. Was this happening to her? Was it not a terrible dream? Or maybe it was really a dream? Maybe she fell asleep to a program that tells about how soulless and heartless sometimes children and grandchildren are, and that's how she dreamed it. How much time had passed, Liz didn't know. But judging by the way the moon moved across the sky and peered through the window with its ghostly disk, it was already night. The door opened and a dark silhouette peered into the dark room. Liz had turned off the lights when she returned. "Grandma, are you asleep?" the silhouette asked in Maggie's voice. Liz held her breath, hiding on the bunk, pretending to sleep, because she knew for sure that if she said a word or glanced at it now, it would be the end. Maggie would realize that she'd heard everything. And then what would happen to her? What would they do to her? The morning of the next day was clear and sunny. The weather was so sunny that one could think that the universe itself was smiling at you, looking in the window. So stop sulking. Get up. Live life to the fullest. But this morning seemed just black to Liz. She waited with fear for Maggie to look in on her, and when her granddaughter came, Liz was shaking every moment. What if she realized from her eyes that she knew everything? But Maggie didn't seem to know anything. She fed Liz with semolina porridge on water as usual, because she was on a diet, gave her tea, gave her another piece of bread, and said she was going to go to the store. She added about her brother, saying that Sami had gone to see if there was any need for laborers at the market. "I can't live on your pension alone," you know, Maggie sighed, pretending to be sad. "I don't know how we're going to get by." "I'm almost well now," granddaughter Liz smiled shyly, her lips trembling. "Thank you, my darlings, for helping me to get back on my feet. You'll soon be able to come home. I'm used to being on my own for years." "What are you talking nonsense, grandmother?" Maggie laughed, but her eyes were not merry and cold. "This is our home. We are, after all, your heirs." "No, grandmother," Maggie wagged her finger at her. "We're not going anywhere from you now. We're not going anywhere. We're going to keep a close eye on you." "Well, I'm off. I'm young. I have to be on time for everything." Liz was as quiet as a mouse until Maggie packed up and left the house. When the key clicked in the lock, the old woman exhaled long and hard. Oh, how she wanted to feel sorry for herself, to sit and cry. But I realized, this is not the case. She had to hurry. She had to save herself before her grandson and granddaughter threw away the Tyler family's legacy. Rising carefully, Liz reached the closet, pulled up a chair. Oh, scary. At her age, falling from such a height could kill you. But her body didn't let her down, and so Liz took a large shoebox from the top of the closet. It was junk, but it held what was dearer to her than anything else in the world: Princess Pelagia's gold. She untangled the old shawls and handkerchiefs that wrapped the carved wooden chest. It had been a long, long time since she had looked in it. Perhaps 5 years already. And why would she do that? Lately, contact with the family history had been painful, stirring up unnecessary memories, making her question the decisions she'd once made. Liz knew there were priceless treasures under the lid, and a notebook with the address and phone number of a man she'd sworn she'd never ask for help. And actually, this is all so silly. Well, really. Alex, then Liz realized she had to call. She had to call. Slowly, tautly, the lid lifted with the creak of ancient wood. Liz knew what she must see: the dull glow of gold in the midday sun. But what appeared before her? The old woman froze, her eyes rounded. Her heart skipped a beat. No, it was impossible. It couldn't be. But the sight did not lie, and she reached into the casket with a trembling hand and took out something she had not expected to find. Not that Joffrey was prepared for such a development, but he sensed that if Granny knew what he was up to, she wouldn't give him a hard time. Because Liz, unfortunately, is too kind and somewhat naive in a person who is in the captivity of his own illusions. Therefore, Joffrey only had to be extremely careful. But at some point, things didn't go according to plan. And he, damn it, was not even allowed to explain himself normally with his grandmother. He wanted to lash out at the two vultures who had the nerve to call themselves Grandma Liz's grandson and granddaughter, but he didn't. Because he realized that this time there would be no victory on his side. And in order to be able to continue to do everything normally, and not to ruin the relationship with his grandmother under the influence of others, Joffrey decided to leave her house. Just for a while, just for a day or two. And then, it was only necessary to buy time, when the vulture's damned vultures would not be in the apartment and could talk to his grandmother about everything. That was Joffrey's plan. And it wasn't bad at all. The guy stood at the bus stop, under its iron visor, and waited for the bus. While he was waiting for transportation, he went to the internet via smartphone and renewed the lease of a daily apartment, which he had already looked for a long time, because it was getting harder and harder to live in an apartment. And Joffrey decided that he would live there first, and then he would probably rent an apartment for a longer period of time because he would have to stay in the city for his grandmother's business. Joffrey was heartily grateful to the university authorities, who, having heard about his family's circumstances, granted him a leave of absence without any criticism or reproach. Raising the collar of his jacket, it was pouring rain. Joffrey stretched his neck, looking for the bus. And then, everything happened in a flash. Just one car at the crossroads suddenly lost control, probably because of the wet road, or maybe something happened to the brakes, but it was suddenly carried to the side. People from the bus stop scattered. Joffrey, immersed in his thoughts, hesitated. And then there was a blow, a flash of deafening pain and darkness. "Am I all right?" was the first thing Joffrey asked when he woke up. And he asked it for two reasons. First, there was no pain in his body, which was naturally suspicious after such a collision. And second, there was a marvelous golden-haired creature leaning over him, who could easily be mistaken for a guide to a better world. Like those who are dying to lead through the tunnel to the eternal light. Alive and not even broken, which is amazing, said a gruff voice, and the marvelous creature was displaced by a bearded man in a hospital gown. The doctor, and it was he, introduced himself to Harry and told him that Joffrey had been lucky to get away with a few bruises and a suspected concussion. All he had to do was not cross the road at a red light. What? Joffrey's eyes widened. The car lost control. No, the doctor frowned. Don't you start laying blame on me. Eyewitnesses saw you step into the roadway thinking about something. They called out to you, but you ran like a rhinoceros right into the car, which did lose control a little. Yeah, Joffrey squirmed guiltily against the cushions, remembering that he'd been so absorbed in thought that he'd taken a careless step forward. So, if it hadn't been for my own stupidity, it wouldn't have hit me, maybe. And who is this? He asked and wanted to stretch his neck. because the broad shoulders of the doctor blocked the golden-haired woman, but immediately shrieked from the shooting pain in his neck. "The one you scared to death," replied the girl, "and the perpetrator of the incident, apparently." What? Joffrey smiled weakly. "No, they say it was my own fault," said the girl. "And I'm to blame," said the girl. "I should have minimized speed in the rain, but I just did not expect." "So don't argue now, okay?" Reunited said sternly. "Why did I allow you to see the patient at all? In general, will you write a claim for damage to health? The guilty party is ready to pay for all treatment, and also compensation for moral damage." The girl nodded hastily. But the last thing Joffrey could think about now was money. "No one else was hurt," the girl said. "Well, just my car had hit a concrete fence." "Are you all right?" shrieked Joffrey. As you can see, she smiled charmingly. The airbag didn't fail. "Well, here's my phone." With these words, she put a sheet on the bedside table. "I'll be in touch. I won't run away. And here's one more thing." She dug into her purse and pulled out a wad of bills. "I withdrew it from the nearest ATM. It's here, near the hospital. I keep the rest at home, in cash. I'll bring it all back by tonight." "Wait a minute," Joffrey squinted, his head spinning as if he'd been forced on a merry-go-round for hours on end. "What's your name?" Larry replied, a beautiful woman with a golden mane of curly hair who looked to be in her early 20s. "And now, please, the visiting hours are all ready." Reunited got into the conversation again. "You can come back later. And right now the young man needs rest and I must tell him about his condition. Further necessary observation, treatment." "Yes, of course." Larry's making a fuss. "Get well and... forgive me, I'm sorry, it's very just terrible," she added from the doorway. Joffrey smiled weakly at her. He didn't feel sick and broken. On the contrary, light as a cloud. "Don't get too excited," the doctor warned. "Soon the effect of drugs will go down and I'll feel every bone. But don't worry, we'll find you some weaker painkillers. In the meantime, let's talk about this. Who are your contacts?" "No," said Joffrey. "I'm from out of town. My father's there, but he won't be able to come for sure." "That's too bad," the doctor shook his head. "Someone has to take care of you. You'll be out of the hospital soon." "I'm renting an apartment," Joffrey went on. "I was thinking of renting for a long time. I have a grandmother in town." "That's great. We'll let my grandmother know." "No," exclaimed the boy, and seeing how the doctor's eyebrows went up, explained. "She can't worry, she's sick herself and there's no point anyway. She and we had a very big quarrel." "Would you like me to share an observation, as a doctor who's been here for 20 years? No matter how much relatives fight, usually when someone goes to the hospital, all the fuss and misunderstandings go away. Relatives, usually do not abandon." "Well, all right," Joffrey sighed. "But let's do it tomorrow already. Grandma, she thinks I'm just sitting in my apartment anyway, and she's not going to come looking for me today." Liz felt like a complete fool, an idiot, as she dialed that very phone number. She was well aware of how much time had passed and that it could have been changed 100 times already. And anyway, in the age of digital technology, it was reasonable to assume that instead of a landline phone, everyone was using a cell phone, which meant that the only way to get in touch with Alex, if he was still alive at all, would be to send a letter. And he might not have lived at that address for decades, and how long that letter would take. And yet, Liz dialed the number. "You old fool," she told herself after the 6th ringtone, but the receiver was suddenly picked up. They answered in English, and Liz's mind was so out of foreign language it was like a foreign language. The other end asked, "Who is this?" and probably would have hung up, thinking it was a prank call, but then Liz finally pulled herself together and asked Alex. "Who is it?" they asked. "You see, Grandpa's not very well." "But is he sane?" Liz blurted out, suddenly afraid that Alex might, theoretically, be suffering from dementia. Liz, almost crying, began to apologize and say that she was just an old acquaintance of his, and she didn't think that she would catch him after so many years, and she was very, very sorry for the indelicacy. But if you can, tell him that it's Lizonka calling, the same one who once visited him at his dacha. "All right," said a man's voice on the other side, uncertainly. "I'll ask my grandfather now." "Wait, okay?" Liz thanked Mikhail, the man who had introduced himself as Alex's son, and waited. Her heart was beating fast and it seemed too heavy. Is he going to tell her something? And in general, why is she calling him? What does he recognize it's time an old man? Can she, an old woman from his distant past, help her now? He lives in another country. This is ridiculous. No, Liz thought she should end the call now, tear the sheet with the number, and address to shreds, forget the whole thing and try to. Liz? The voice she heard was exactly as she remembered it, and for a split second the past and the future seemed to blend together. "Alex," Liz breathed out. You're alive." Liz couldn't take it anymore, and she started to cry. "Okay, first of all, calm down." His voice was as stern as it was soothing. "I suppose you didn't call me for the first and only time after all these years to talk about Silver Age poetry. Tell me what happened, and we'll figure out what to do next." Joffrey hated being sick. It came from his childhood when his father, under the influence of his neighbor Aunt Ducia, a great admirer of folk medicine, had treated his flu with steam from a pot of potatoes and some disgusting fat dissolved in hot milk. And so, although the hospital was clean and even fed good food, and the neighbors on the ward were quiet and decent, and although the nurse was young and cheerful, but from the face of Joffrey still did not go sour, dissatisfied with everything in the world Mina. Naturally, it was necessary to settle all the formalities that he had no claims to Larry. By the way, they talked not only about the business topic, but also about everything. It turned out that Laurie was born and raised in this city, and once, almost 15 years ago, her parents, who had previously lived in Sweden, moved here because the family had roots here. When she learned that Joffrey was studying to be a jeweler, Laurie laughed and said it was a funny coincidence, almost because she had already studied to be a geologist and dreamed of devoting her life to precious and ornamental stones. "Have you got a boyfriend?" Joffrey suddenly blurted out. "You ask too many questions for someone I hit with a car." Larry wagged her finger at him, and then suddenly got serious and answered. "No. And I'm not ready for a relationship yet. Love. It's too complicated. First you need to stand firmly on your feet, to live for yourself. And then already let another person into your life." "That makes sense." Joffrey nodded, his hair reddening. "I asked you that, by the way, without thinking. I'm not hitting on you. Look, I'm getting discharged tomorrow," he sighed. "On the daily I still prolonged. I'll lie there. Then I'll look at other apartments, well, to rent for a long time. In general, thank you for offering moral compensation and all that, but I cannot agree to it. Thank you for giving me more money for treatment. And so, my father will send me. I'm fine, I'll hold out. But he will send in 3 days only. I've already paid for the apartment for these days. In general." Joffrey again sighed. "Honestly, I have only 500 rubles in my wallet. Can you pay for a cab to get me to my apartment? I'm afraid I'll have a hard time taking public transportation. My back hurts." "I'll drive you," she said, and hastily, noticing how Joffrey's eyes rounded, added, "Not me, but my father. He can take you in the car. I won't drive again for a while, I'm afraid. Also, I've been thinking. Well, since you're a little short on money then. You know, my dad's at the country house. An old country house, built in the 50s or even earlier. Maybe. Will you stay with us? Well, while you're recovering. Fresh air. And there's no worries, my dad has a woman working there. Tina's name is Tina. She's a great maid and cook. Anyway, I'm sorry I'm rambling, it's the first time it's happened. And with a car and a man. It's the first time." Joffrey blurted out and then stopped talking, because the joke was stupid, inappropriate, and not about anything. Laurie looked at him in confusion too, and then for some reason they laughed together. "You agree, Guy?" came the voice of a neighbor in the ward, 40-year-old metallurgist, who went to the hospital with an industrial injury. If in my 20s such a girl offered me a visit, I would fly like a dove if I didn't go." Joffrey sighed. Maybe. It really wasn't such a bad option, was it? It had been a few days since he'd left his grandmother's apartment, by the way, and he thought that Liz must have cooled down enough to listen to him. And they had to talk. Judging by the way the half-brother and sister were behaving, it was urgent to rescue Grandma from their company. with Larry agreed that she would pick him up the next day in the morning. That evening, however, Joffrey dialed Liz's number. He waited. He called back. But the caller was unavailable. His heart felt uneasy, and he dialed Maggie's number. She seemed a little more human to him than Sami's brother. "She's not here." Maggie blurted out with an intonation that betrayed confusion, indignation, and deep drunkenness. "She's gone, the old fool." "Where?" asked Joffrey. "How should I know?" Maggie shrieked. "We caught her in the driveway. She got in the car with some guy, a man in a suit, and said that she was going on vacation. And we. She said that she was tired and needed to think about everything. That man is a bore said that we do not think." "How did he say?" "Ah, intrigue. No, can you imagine?" Joffrey had no idea. Rubbing the bridge of his nose nervously, he didn't know what to think. Who and where could quiet, timid Grandma Liz have gone? What if, exhausted by the bad company of her grandchildren, she'd gotten involved with some kind of crook, cult, black realtor? Joffrey felt a pang of guilt. He was good, too. He should have realized what rotten people his brother and sister were, and he should have been more decisive, should have talked to Liz instead of not scheming himself. "By the way," Maggie continued in a stuttering voice, "what's the word intrigue, huh?" "I have no idea," Joffrey smirked, though of course he knew the meaning of the word perfectly well. "Bye, then," and he ended the conversation. He was in a state of shock. Where could Grandma Liz have gone? And with whom? Why wasn't she answering his calls? In fact, Joffrey realized with his mind that she had probably not yet discovered that something very important to her was missing, her main jewel, namely gold. Yes, Joffrey had left his grandmother's apartment for a reason. A couple of days before Liz had thrown him out in a scandal, he had taken advantage of her absence. She had been with Maggie and Sami at the clinic to go into her room, and knowing perfectly well where the treasure chest had been kept all these years, had taken it out. He opened it, put the gold in a box, and put it in his inconspicuous sports traveling bag. In place, that is, at the bottom of the chest, put a note in which he explained everything as it is. "Mole, I'm taking this, grandmother, to save for you, because your grandchildren relatives are already thinking about how to divide it." In general, Joffrey, when all this was arranged, hoped that he would be able to personally with his grandmother to talk about all this before she noticed the disappearance of gold jewelry. After all, he knew for a fact that she had not touched them for years, and therefore theoretically she should not have noticed that they were missing. But anything could have happened. And now Joffrey wondered, and if she had found out that they were missing, how had she reacted? Did she believe what he said in the note? Just words, with no proof that he was right? Or did she curse him as a dishonorable thief? Or maybe Granny had already filed a complaint against him. But Joffrey thought if the latter was true, they would probably have found him in the hospital by now and come to him here. So where was the truth? And who the hell had taken his grandmother away, and where? On the day he was discharged from the hospital, Joffrey was worried sick. His own consent seemed to him a rash folly. After all, he hardly knew Larry at all, and he had already accepted an invitation to visit her at home. And not even at home, but at her country cottage. But on the other hand, why would she plot something evil against him? It's more like she's trying to make it up to him for hitting him with her car. The day he was discharged from the hospital, Larry and her father came to pick him up. Vincent, a solid-looking man in a suit, shook Joffrey's hand and said he sympathized with him and was grateful that he had agreed to a peaceful resolution to the whole thing. "Yes, it was nothing," replied Joffrey with a look as if his cars were being hit on a weekly and regular basis. From the hospital, they went first to a rented apartment. They had to pack their things, which, fortunately, were few. Unnoticed by his new acquaintances, Joffrey poked his hand into the bag with the gold. The box with it seemed to be still inside. The jewelry rustled if the bag was shaken. On the way to the cottage, we got to talking to Vincent. It turned out that he is engaged in honey business. He said that he owns several apiaries, supplies bee products to many stores, and in general does not regret that he settled here. Because here is his real home. Here has felt some special, almost mystical connection with the ancestors. "My father is thinking of coming here this year," too, Vincent said, "for a visit. I don't want to disturb. Well, I mean, it's a family atmosphere, and here's a stranger." "It's all right," Vincent smiled, "but I must warn you. Besides me and Tina and you, There will be one other person living at the cottage. A pensioner, an old acquaintance of my father's. That's all right, said Joffrey. I have a grandmother myself. Larry said you had a fight with her? Vincent grinned. Generational differences? Something like that, Joffrey said, not wanting to be privy to any personal squabbles. Family circumstances, he said, staring thoughtfully out the window at the summer scenery and planning how to look for Granny, because of course he couldn't leave it at that. Wow. That was all Joffrey could say when the cottage appeared in front of them, when they drove through the pine grove. At first sight it was clear it was an unusual place, which seemed to exist in some detachment from the surrounding, mundane world. The two-storied building reminded of a harem, as it is often depicted in Russian fairy tales, but at the same time it was felt that everything here was thought out for the comfort, modern convenience of the inhabitants. The lower floor was flanked by a veranda, partly glazed, partly open, with a railing and columns covered with skillful carvings and covered with some curly and lushly blooming plants. Welcome, Vincent smiled as Joffrey got out of the car. Here's our family, and here's our guest. From the porch of the house came a short, plump, but clearly full of vitality woman of about 50, dressed in a brightly colored dress. You are, of course, Joffrey, she smiled broadly at the boy, introduced herself as Tina, and taking him firmly under her arm and even hugging him around the waist, led him toward the house. I'll make you some tea now. How do you feel about raspberry jam? I made a pie with it. There's also fish pie. And soup. Cabbage salad with carrots and apple. Oh, careful, the step is sagging here, it should be fixed. Don't worry. I've prepared a bedroom for you downstairs. You're in no condition to run up and down stairs, are you? Tina was still talking, and Joffrey couldn't get a word in edgewise. Vincent and Larry laughed at the encounter. Vincent carried Joffrey's bags into his room, and Larry joined Tina in talking about the cottage and its surroundings. And now we have a surprise for you, Vincent said abruptly, as the little group made their way to what he said was the veranda at the back of the house, where the tea table was set. A surprise? It wasn't that Joffrey didn't like surprises, but he'd never been spoiled with them in his life, and he hadn't realized what there might be. And then when he stepped out onto the veranda and saw who was standing in front of him, he was speechless. Grandma? Liz smiled at her grandson and opened her arms to him, and he, still not too sure of the reality of the surrounding reality, stepped towards her. Grandma, but what are you doing here? And you? Joffrey swallowed hard and looked into the old woman's eyes. They were warm, tender. Have you forgiven me, Grandma? How could I not, grandson? She said and stroked his head, ruffling his already unruly hair. I think you have a lot of questions. Joffrey nodded, but before he could say a word, Tina intervened, saying that it was best not to eat on an empty stomach, and that everyone should sit down and she would serve the pies and everything. Joffrey talked himself into taking his time, if only out of respect for the owners of the house, whose identity he was now much more concerned about, and indeed drank a cup of tea, ate a little something. And then finally Liz spoke. And to begin with, she spoke briefly about how she had met Alex in her youth, how fate had divided them, and how then, lo and behold, just the other day she had realized it was time to turn to him. It turned out that Alex couldn't help her so quickly. If he wanted to, he was far away vacationing at a resort, but he could entrust the care of an old friend to his son Vincent. I almost went crazy when I saw him. Liz smiled. He looks just like his father when he was young. Oh, if I weren't so old, I'd be madly in love, she said, and laughed. Liz hastened to tell Joffrey that she had overheard the whole sordid, dirty conversation between her blood grandson and granddaughter, which had opened her eyes to many things. And then, when she read Joffrey's note, a lot of things came together for her. You know, the day after I called Alex, I went to the clinic with Sami, Liz said, and when I got home, I saw that my room had been turned upside down. Maggie said she wanted to tidy up my room, and her eyes were running around. I knew right away it wasn't true. She's never been used to cleanliness or order, and the way everything was torn through, I realized what she really wanted. She was looking for gold. And then, a few days later, Liz said, growing sad, Sami came to me. He had been drinking heavily. He started asking me how I was, how old I was, had I already written a will for my grandchildren. I told him to stop saying such things, but he got angry. Believe me, he pushed me so hard that I fell. What a bastard. Joffrey almost jumped up from the table, as if he were going to run to his brother to punch him in the face. Maggie calmed him down. Liz continued. I was shaking all night. I had a chair against the door, but if they'd wanted to break in, the chair wouldn't have stopped them. In the morning, Sammy apologized. Maggie begged for her brother. Well, I pretended that everything was fine, that I didn't hold a grudge. I really don't hold a grudge, Liz shrugged. What good is anger? It just eats away at your soul like rust. I decided I couldn't stay in my own house with them anymore. And then Alex talked it over with his son, and Vincent offered me a place to stay while everything was sorted out. Grandma, I always knew. Joffrey started to speak fervently, but then, pulling himself together, he continued more calmly. I always thought Maggie and Sami weren't the most decent people. I'm sorry. It's all right, Liz sighed. Life happens. I'm lucky to have one grandson. A real one.